Chapter 985. The architecture in the monster region wasn't as exquisite as the human world. Even in the royal palace, the buildings were mostly made of huge rocks and long wood. It was extremely majestic, but not as exquisite. Under the guidance of the maid, I came to the side of an umbrella-like palace. It was the wedding room that Wei Weian and I used on the day of our wedding. At this moment, there were many red cloths that were folded into the shape of flower petals on both sides of the palace door. There was also a long red carpet at the entrance. The wedding attire was still there. When I walked into the palace, I saw Wei Weian sitting not far away from me. She was still wearing the traditional golden robe of the lion race, but it wasn't as complicated as the wedding attire. When she saw me enter, she immediately stood up and bowed towards me, but didn't say a word. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. I walked over and sat down. After staying silent for a moment, I told Wei Weian about the fief that her father had given me. After briefly explaining the situation, I continued to tell Wei Weian, even though our marriage was just a transaction, we still have the status. After Nam and the rest move in, you'll follow me to the fief. I won't be staying in the monster region for long. I'll need your help to take care of Nam and the rest's affairs in the fief. Even though I said that, in reality, Wei Weian would be the one in control of the fief after I left. It could be considered as giving her a place to settle down. At the same time, with Wei Weian around, the safety of Nam and the rest of the Doghead tribe would be more guaranteed. After hearing what I said, Wei Weian stayed silent for a moment before lifting her head to look at me. That's your Doghead tribe's fief. If you want to leave, you can just hand it over to Nam or the other tribe members to manage. Why hand it over to me? Duoji, you already said that our wedding was just a transaction. I've also gotten what I wanted, so you don't have to feel guilty towards me. I smiled wryly and hastily explained. Don't misunderstand. I do feel guilty towards you, but this matter isn't just because of guilt. Once I leave the monster region for a long period of time, Nam and the rest will enjoy the treatment of the Monster Emperor's clansmen without the protection of the Monster Emperor. It's only a matter of time before they attract a calamity. I'm worried about them, so I can only ask you to take care of them. Vivian listened to my explanation and for some reason, she suddenly smiled. Then, she shook her head and said, as long as you don't die, no one from the Monster Emperor's clan will dare to bully you. But don't worry, I've agreed to this matter, but it can't be considered as compensation. This is what I should have obtained from that transaction. Vivian had been sad and disappointed ever since she caught a glimpse of him at the banquet, but for some reason, she seemed to be happy all of a sudden. There was a smile on her face, and the sadness on her face had disappeared. Seeing her like this, I heaved a sigh of relief and nodded. That's right. You deserve it. If you really want to compensate me, pick a longevity grass and give it to me. Vivian suddenly made another request. Longevity grass? This was a strange term that I had never heard before. Vivian saw that I didn't understand, so she started to explain. According to her, this longevity grass was a famous immortal herb in the monster domain. It only grew in the scattered star sea in the extreme north. Legend had it that consuming this immortal herb would increase one's lifespan by 200 years, and at the same time, it could make one stay young forever. Even with my current cultivation as a monster emperor, I was speechless when I heard about these two effects. The lifespan of a monster emperor or a Xiaoju immortal was unlimited. With an unlimited lifespan, one's youth naturally wouldn't fade. These two effects were useless to me, but to a normal person who was below the monster emperor rank, it was comparable to an elixir. It wasn't surprising that Vivian would make such a request. I first nodded in agreement, before asking what kind of place was the scattered star sea that she mentioned. The scattered star sea is the holy land of ferocious beasts. There are countless ferocious beasts of the monster saint and monster god realm. There are even ferocious beasts of the monster emperor realm. A normal person wouldn't be able to enter, and only the monster emperor could barely enter. Moreover, they might encounter danger. After listening to her explanation, my first reaction was elation. There were actually monster emperors among the ferocious beasts. Firstly, this meant that the world of the monster emperor wasn't as lonely as I imagined it to be. Secondly, it pointed out a path of cultivation for me. Prior had already told me that the only way to increase my realm in the future was to obtain the source of demonic power. Hunting ferocious beasts was undoubtedly easier than hunting other monster emperors. It was also more practical than obtaining the source of demonic power from other places through luck. Other than this path, the longevity grass was undoubtedly a good item. Apart from gifting it to Vivian, I could also bring it to the human world and gift it to other people that I was familiar with. Among the negative effects of an unlimited lifespan, the sense of loneliness was undoubtedly at the forefront. A large part of this loneliness came from the constant aging and death of the people around me. I didn't have much feelings towards this loneliness, but it didn't mean that I couldn't imagine it. The longevity grass would undoubtedly be able to temporarily alleviate this problem. After thinking about the matters that I had to do, I couldn't head to the scattered star sea now. Thus, I told Vivian that I would make a trip there after 2 months. If I was able to successfully gather the longevity grass, I would bring it back for her. Even if I couldn't do it for the time being, I would definitely do it in the future. It was obvious that Vivian wasn't in a hurry. After hearing my promise, she revealed a smile and nodded, telling me that she would be waiting. After chatting about this matter, the subtle awkwardness between Vivian and me magically disappeared. However, she still excused herself and left. I similarly didn't stay for long. After sitting and thinking for a moment, I left the imperial palace and returned to the inn that I had previously stayed at in King's City. When the snake spirit saw me, he heaved a sigh of relief. His concerned tone carried a hint of reproach as he asked me why I had mingled with Prior for so long, causing him to constantly worry about me. I was slightly puzzled as I asked, "Prior doesn't have any hostility towards me. What are you worried about?" The snake spirit shook his head. "I've heard from the people in the dragon's territory that Prior is a terrifying monster emperor. Moreover, I can faintly feel this. A 4th-grade monster emperor represented the strongest power in the monster domain. It wouldn't be wrong to use the word terrifying to describe it." I didn't pay attention to the snake spirit's words and asked him what he had been doing during this period of time. "What else can I be doing? I'm just waiting for your news. It's been a total of 49 days of darkness. If it wasn't because I knew that it was a phenomenon caused by you advancing to the monster emperor, I would have thought that the monster domain's doomsday had arrived." The snake spirit's face was filled with worry as he spoke. I had always felt that even if the sky were to collapse, the snake spirit would only laugh as he ran away. It was rare to see him so worried. The monster domain's doomsday. It doesn't sound like a bad thing. What's there to worry about? What's wrong with you? Could it be that you're jealous that I advanced to the monster emperor? I said half-jokingly. The snake spirit rolled his eyes at me and the worry on his face lessened. He shook his head. "Why would I be jealous? You might not know that our dragon race is unable to cultivate to the monster emperor realm. There's no point in being jealous." This was the first time I had heard of such a saying. I couldn't help but be interested as I immediately questioned him. The snake spirit then told me that the dragon race could only advance to the monster emperor realm after obtaining the power of the primal chaos. This was completely different from when I advanced to the monster emperor realm after obtaining a trace of the power of the primal chaos. To me, that trace of the primal chaos was just a catalyst. The essence of the monster emperor power that I obtained was still the source of the monster power. To the dragon race, the source of the primal chaos was their entire power. There was a huge difference between the two. Vivian's mere trace of the primal chaos was the rarest thing in the world. As for the dragon race, they needed a large amount of the source of the primal chaos to advance to the monster emperor realm. It was impossible to find it. That was why the snake spirit said that it was impossible for the dragon race to cultivate to the monster emperor realm. I frowned as I felt that it was unbelievable. If the dragon race didn't have a monster emperor, why did the dragon territory have such a high status? The snake spirit seemed to have seen through my doubts. Without waiting for me to ask, he continued to tell me that the dragon race actually had a monster emperor. He was the actual ruler of the dragon territory, the Black Dragon King. He was also the only monster emperor of the dragon race. The monster emperor of the dragon race that possessed the power of primal chaos would naturally suppress the other monster emperors, regardless of their rank. This explained the dragon territory's high status. After answering this question, the snake spirit mentioned Vivian. He told me that the reason why he had chased after Vivian was because he had sensed the power of primal chaos in her body. It was just that he wasn't aware of it at that time. He had only vaguely sensed it now. After understanding this matter, I also understood the changes in the snake spirit's emotions. I extended my hand and patted his shoulder. I didn't know how to comfort him. For the next half a month, I stayed in the inn and meditated every day to comprehend the power of the monster emperor in my body. I gradually familiarized myself with the usage of this power. Vivian didn't appear again. Pulai Air didn't question me about why I left the palace. As for the snake spirit, the short period of worry that day seemed to be just a dream. He quickly returned to his normal state and went out to have fun every day. He was still living a carefree life. Chapter 986. The territory of the monster region was extremely vast. Back then, the spirit snake and I had traveled from the northern province to King City with the black dragon beast under our feet. Of course, this was mostly due to the fact that we were constantly on the move, as well as the fact that we took a huge detour from the western and southern provinces. However, even if we were to disregard these factors, it would take us at least a month to reach King City with the Black Dragon Beast. From this point, it was impossible for the Doghead tribe to travel such a long distance in half a month. They should have started their journey during the 49 days of night. Furthermore, they had ferocious beasts that weren't inferior to the Black Dragon Beast as their means of transportation. This matter wasn't worth mentioning. After all, the subordinates of Pulair would carry out Pulair's orders strictly. However, if this matter was combined with the fact that Pulair allowed me to get together with Vivian, explained the cultivation above the monster ruler to me, and even took the initiative to give me land, it would be very unusual. All the signs showed that Pulair treated me very well. Furthermore, this kindness couldn't be explained by the need for talents in the monster region. In this kind of explanation, everything else was understandable. It was either something that I had to do or something that I should do with my status. However, the matter of bringing the Doghead tribe to King City in advance couldn't be explained. Pulair was a 4th-grade monster ruler, the ruler of the monster region. However, his attitude towards this matter wasn't just friendly, it was rather humble. In simpler terms, it was something that he didn't need to think about. It wasn't something that a superior should do. However, he did it. Why was that? I kept thinking about this question on the way to welcome the Doghead tribe, but I couldn't find an answer. In the end, I could only attribute it to my sensitivity. The Doghead tribe departed from the northern province. Thus, they didn't reach King City via the southern pier, but the northern gate. When I reached there, the two sides of the northern gate were filled with King City guards. Even the road had been cleaned. Not far from the northern gate sat a dozen enormous bird-type ferocious beasts. They had 4 limbs under their abdomens and their bodies were covered in tiger stripe. They were the Ingzhao beasts that were rarely seen in the monster region. They looked similar to the Ingzhao beasts that I had ridden before. However, they were several times larger and their rarity couldn't be compared to the Ingzhao beasts. Between the Ingzhao beasts and the north gate, hundreds of Doghead clan members stood there cautiously, waiting quietly. There were a few hundred of them standing together, forming a dense mass. They seemed to be much more numerous than the kobolds I had seen in Green Water Village. However, since they were migrating their entire tribe, the kobolds who were servants in the city should have been found and brought along. Standing in front of the crowd were Namu and Chief Bill. The expressions of the two were completely different. Chief Bill's face was full of hardships and worries. He stood there with a pair of dim yellow eyes looking into the distance without any spirit. On the other hand, Nam's face was full of excitement and anticipation. He would occasionally tiptoe and look around. At this moment, Nam was already in the middle stage of the Demon King realm. Of course, this kind of cultivation was nothing in Monarch City. The lowest requirement for the Monarch City guards standing beside them was to be a Demon King. The two people standing beside them who looked like generals had the cultivation of a demon god. Judging from their identity as werewolves, they were most likely escorting them all the way here. Seeing my appearance, Nam cheered. He raised his arm and shouted, "Duo G, I knew it was you. I told them that it was you, but they didn't believe me. Now you know, it's Duo G who has become our kobold monster emperor." The latter part of his sentence was obviously said to his clansmen behind him. I was a little curious. They had already rushed all the way to Monarch City, but why didn't they know who the kobold monster emperor was? After asking, the werewolf monster god didn't wait for Nam to reply. He bowed and replied, "Esteemed monster emperor, your name is as dazzling as the sun. It isn't something that lowly servants like us can call you directly. Furthermore, Emperor Prior's orders didn't mention your name. Thus, when your clansmen asked, we didn't have an answer." Previously in Rock City, not to mention the werewolf monster god, even the most ordinary werewolf clansmen would raise their heads to the sky when they saw the kobold. But now, the werewolf monster god actually referred to himself as a servant in front of me. I couldn't help but say that the authority that came with such power was really intoxicating. I didn't care about the two werewolf clansmen and only looked at Nam. I hugged him and laughed together. "Duo G, even though I always felt that you would become the kobold monster emperor, I didn't expect it to be so fast." Nam was the first to speak. "I took a shortcut. Let's not talk about this first. You, on the other hand, reached the Monster King's cultivation in just a few years. Not bad." Hearing what I said, Nam's expression darkened. He shook his head. "My talent is still too low. You gave me so many beast pills, but I only managed to graduate from Thad Academy last year." I smiled and patted his shoulder. "Don't be discouraged. You said that you wanted to become the kobold monster emperor. Even though you can't be the first, you can still be the second." Nam curled his lips. It was obvious that he didn't agree with what I said, but he didn't say anything else. On the other hand, Village Chief Bill, who had been looking at me in a daze, suddenly muttered, "How can a kobold monster emperor become a monster emperor? You aren't a kobold monster." Just as I noticed what he said, a King's City guard hurriedly ran over and told me that Emperor Prior had already prepared a temporary residence for my clansmen in the inner city. Furthermore, he had something to discuss with me and asked me to head over. Since Prior had something to summon me, I had to head over. Thus, I instructed the guard to bring the kobold monster tribe to settle down. After explaining everything, just as I was about to leave, I suddenly remembered Nam's appearance when he told me about Emperor Prior. Thus, I turned to ask him, "Nam, do you want to meet the Emperor Prior that you worship?" Even the usually carefree Nam's expression froze when he heard my suggestion. After a short moment, he looked at me hesitantly and asked, "Can I?" "Of course you can." I didn't give him a chance to hesitate and grabbed his arm. With just 2 steps, we arrived at the entrance of the palace in the inner city. Prior was sitting alone in the palace. When he saw that I had brought Nam in, he had a confused expression. After a short moment, he recovered his usual smile and asked me, "Are these your clansmen? I heard that they've already arrived at King's City. How was it?" "It was a bumpy journey. Were there any problems?" I cupped my hands to express my thanks. With your meticulous arrangements, of course there weren't any problems. This is a good friend of mine. Many years ago, I've heard him talk about his worship of you. Since he's come to King City, I brought him here to take a look. Prior laughed heartily and didn't seem to mind. Instead, he warmly asked Nam a few questions about his name and cultivation. Just a few simple words made Nam's face flush. He was so nervous that he didn't know where to put his hands. After the short conversation, Prior's gaze returned to me. He didn't care about Nam's existence and directly said to me, Duo G, there's less than a month before the primal chaos beast awakening ceremony begins. Do you know anything about this matter? Hearing that, I was stunned. Of course I knew about this matter. In reality, the main reason why I came to King City was for this matter. It's just that Prior had never mentioned this matter to me before. Now that he suddenly asked me, I couldn't guess his motive. I even suspected that he knew something. After a short moment, I suppressed the waves in my heart and nodded. These few years, many people in the monster region have been discussing about the 4 vicious beasts. I've heard about it. Prior nodded. His expression didn't reveal any clues as he continued to say, the other 3 beasts have already awakened and the process was extremely smooth. However, the last primal chaos beast is extremely strange. I nodded and didn't say anything as I waited for him to continue. A few days ago, I told you about the source of power. You should understand what the word primal chaos represents. Prior continued to say, Primal chaos? My gaze focused. Could it be that this primal chaos beast was related to the source of primal chaos? Prior seemed to have seen through my thoughts as he nodded. You guessed correctly. The primal chaos beast is born from the source of primal chaos. It's rumored that through the primal chaos beast, one can peek into the source of primal chaos. My heart shuddered. On one hand, it was because of the information that he had told me. On the other hand, it was because I couldn't understand why he would tell me this. Even though we weren't like the dragon race who could only absorb the power of the source of primal chaos, the power was still much stronger than the source of our monster power. If the demonic Thearchs were a group of sharks, then this information regarding the source of power would be the blood food that was scattered into the sea. Any shark that smelled the scent of the blood food would disregard everything and fight for it. Why would Pu Lar tell me such precious information? Even Wu Juzui wasn't here. Chapter 987. I pondered in my heart, but my expression didn't change. After a moment of silence, I asked Prior, This matter is of great importance. Father-in-law has specially informed me. Could it be that there's something I can help with? Prior's expression revealed a tinge of admiration. It's not about helping or not. To pry into the origin of chaos, one must have the power of chaos in their body. Even though I'm at the 4th grade, I don't have any power of chaos in my body. Hence, I can only rely on you for this matter. He was rather frank as he told me the reason directly. Hence, I didn't doubt him anymore. I nodded and agreed to the matter. Prior continued, There's still some time before the awakening of the primal chaos beast. During this period of time, if you have the time, try to comprehend the power of chaos in your body. The more you comprehend, the more chances you'll have. He seemed to be rather confident in me, but I didn't hold much hope in my heart. If there was a high chance of success, Prior wouldn't be so kind as to give me such a great opportunity. It wasn't that I was a petty person, but the origin of chaos was of great importance. There was no reason for Prior to give it to me for no reason at all. Furthermore, the path of cultivation was a process of fighting. It was already fortunate that others didn't fight for it. I wasn't that naive to hope that he would give it to me for no reason. He most likely wanted me to scout the way. Once there was any discovery, the benefits would definitely be his. If he could share it with me, it would already be considered as him being considerate. I nodded and didn't say anything. Prior continued, For the awakening ceremony of the primal chaos beast, all the monster emperors from the monster domain have to be present. The person presiding over the ceremony is the master of the dragon domain. You should know that the monster emperors of the dragon race naturally use the power of chaos as their source. The Black Dragon King definitely won't let go of this opportunity. There's only a sliver of the power of chaos in your body. It'll be best if you can comprehend it during this period of time. If not, it's fine too. You just have to keep a close eye on the Black Dragon King during the ceremony. Whatever he does, you might just gain something. I finally understood. Prior definitely wanted to borrow my power to pry into the origin of chaos. Apart from that, he also wanted to use me to monitor the Black Dragon King. Even though the dragon domain was a part of the monster domain, the dragon race was an independent power. I didn't believe that there weren't any grudges between the two races. From the looks of the situation in the demon region, the Black Dragon King's cultivation should not be inferior to Prior's. In fact, it was most likely above Prior's. Now that the Chaos Beast had awakened, it was an opportunity for the Black Dragon King. Once he obtained benefits from it and broke the balance between the dragon region and the demon region, it would threaten Prior's rule over the demon region. This was something that Prior definitely did not wish to see. Hence, he had lured me into the trap. I didn't feel like I was being used. To me, this was also an opportunity. If I could really obtain some benefits from this, I wouldn't mind taking advantage of it. After thinking it through, my heart that had been hanging in the air finally calmed down. I immediately patted my chest and expressed to Prior that I would definitely do my best to comprehend during this period of time. When the time comes, I will strive to make some discoveries and not let him down. Hearing my promise, Prior was gratified and encouraged me with a few words. Afterwards, he asked about the Doghead tribe to express his concern for me. After thanking Prior, I took Namu with me and left. As soon as he walked out of the palace gates, Nam regained his radiant demeanor. He repeatedly sighed at how approachable Emperor Prior was. He was a completely different person from his previous cowardly self. According to the report of the guards that accompanied us, the Doghead clan had already settled down in a manor in the inner city. Thus, Nam and I hurried over. When we arrived, the other clansmen had probably returned to their rooms to rest. Only village chief Bill, Uncle Chu Wang, and a few other elderly members of the Doghead clan were sitting around a bonfire, waiting for us to return. When they saw me enter, a few of them immediately knelt down to greet me, and called me Lord Monster Emperor. It wasn't the first time I had experienced this kind of etiquette, so I didn't mind it. I just waved my hand to let them get up. On the contrary, Nam, who was standing next to me, jumped in fright and quickly jumped away from me. He didn't dare to accept the village head's etiquette. After chatting with them for a while, I didn't stay here for long. Due to the difference in status, they were much more polite to me. This was something that couldn't be helped. When I returned to my residence, the spirit snake didn't go out to play. He was actually sitting in the room, as though he was cultivating. Just as I thought it was strange, he suddenly jumped up when he saw me and shouted, "Something's wrong! Something's wrong!" I frowned and asked him what happened. The spirit snake told me with a frightened expression that he had received a message from the Black Dragon King, saying that he was coming to King City. I had already heard about this from Prior, but from the spirit snake's appearance, it was obvious that there was something that I didn't know about the Black Dragon King. After asking again, the spirit snake hesitated for a long time before replying, "Actually, it's nothing much. The main thing is that the Black Dragon King is very scary. You haven't seen him before, but when you see him, you will definitely be instinctively afraid." I didn't understand what he had said. The Black Dragon King's cultivation might be very scary, but what was so scary about a human? After cultivating for so many years, he had seen all kinds of monsters and monsters. If the spirit snake was so afraid of him just because of his appearance, it piqued my curiosity. Seeing that I didn't think much of it, the spirit snake didn't continue to emphasize it. Instead, he said to me, we should temporarily separate from each other. The Black Dragon King knows my background. When he arrives at King City and sees that the two of us are so close, he might suspect your identity. I pondered for a while before shaking my head. There's no need for that. Prior, Wu Juzui, and the others know that we have a close relationship. If we deliberately distance ourselves at this time, it will be self-defeating. Moreover, even though the Black Dragon King is powerful, Prior couldn't see through my disguise. He shouldn't be able to either. It's impossible for him to suspect my identity just because of our relationship. Hearing what I had said, the spirit snake's expression became awkward. He continued to insist, I feel that it's best to be more cautious in such matters. It's better to be safe than sorry. Looking at his expression, I instantly became suspicious. I slapped his head. Did you tell some information about me to the Black Dragon King? The spirit snake chuckled. Seeing that I was about to raise my hand to hit him again, he hastily retreated a few steps. He said with an aggrieved expression, I don't know where I was at that time. I saw that he was from the same race as me, so I mentioned you a few times. I wanted him to help me find you. I was so angry that I almost fainted. It was such an important matter, yet he hadn't told me. If I hadn't found some clues, I would have been kept in the dark. Seeing that my expression wasn't good, the spirit snake didn't dare to argue and hastily told me the truth. According to him, he had only briefly mentioned that there was a human who had entered the monster region at the same time as him. He hadn't divulged much about the specific situation. However, when the Black Dragon King had guided him in his cultivation, he had mentioned the relationship between the dragon race and the origin of primal chaos. He had also mentioned that I was cultivating shaman energy. His current worry was also due to this information. After listening to the spirit snake's narration, I calmed down. The origin of primal chaos and shaman energy came from the same source. The information that the spirit snake had divulged was indeed very important. If I were to use shaman energy without knowing it, I would definitely be discovered by the Black Dragon King. However, I already had the cultivation of the Monster Emperor, and the power in my body had already transformed into the origin of monster power. The Black Dragon King wouldn't be able to sense anything from the origin of monster power. It would also be difficult for him to suspect my identity. After pondering for a moment, I finally decided to take the risk. After all, the matter regarding the ferocious beasts was too important, as it was related to the war between the monster region and the human world. I couldn't give up on it no matter what. The spirit snake was still a little worried, but seeing that I had already made my decision, he didn't say anything else. In the following period of time, I comprehended the trace of primal chaos power in my body every day. When I had free time, I would gather with the spirit snake and Nam to play around. After a week, the preparations for the feudal land had been completed. Nam and the other members of the Dog-Head tribe departed for the feudal land. As the primal chaos beasts awakening ceremony was imminent, I didn't send them there. Instead, I specially arranged for the 2 monster gods from the wolf race to escort them to the feudal land. Chapter 988. During the few days of waiting for the awakening of the chaos beast, the spirit snake stayed with me and didn't receive any message from the Black Dragon King. The facts proved that he was thinking too much. Facing such a major event like the awakening of the chaos beast, the Black Dragon King didn't even think of him and wouldn't be suspicious of me because of him. On the day of the awakening ceremony, I got up at dawn and headed to the inner city. Just as I reached the palace, I coincidentally met Vivian. She was riding a horse with a few attendants, as though she was going out to play. Ever since we had resolved the knot in our hearts that day, Vivian had recovered her heroic spirit. She would often visit me these few days, which made me feel more at ease. Seeing me from afar, Vivian pulled the reins to slow the horse's speed and walked in front of me. She smiled and asked me what I was doing in the palace. After knowing that it was about the awakening of the beast, she obviously wasn't interested. She waved her hand and left with her attendants. Before she left, she winked at me to remind me not to forget about the longevity grass. Previously, I had told her that I would leave the monster region after the awakening ceremony. It seemed that she hadn't forgotten about it. After bidding farewell to Vivian, I quickly arrived at the palace that Pu Lai was at. I thought that the other monster thearchs and even the Black Dragon King would gather at Pu Lai's place. I didn't expect Pu Lai to be the only one there. Furthermore, after seeing me, he immediately brought me out of the city. I then found out that it was different from the other three beasts. The location of the Chaos Beast's awakening wasn't at King City, but at the Ruoshui Lake outside of King City. After exiting the South Gate Pier, we followed the Ruoshui Lake for about 100 kilometers. It wasn't far from the place where I had advanced to become a monster thearch. The Chaos Beast's awakening ceremony was held there. 100 kilometers of distance would take an entire day to travel by boat. But for Pu Lai and I, it was just a few minutes of flying. This was a reef island on the Ruoshui Lake. On the black reef that was only a few square meters in size, all the demon emperors from the 4 sides of the demon domain were present. Other than Wu Juzui, there was also the demon emperor of the wolf race, Kru, and the demon emperor of the Kuan Peng race, Tingu, and the demon emperor of the sand lizard race that I had never met before. Different from the other demon thearchs who looked old, the sand lizard clan's demon thearch looked like a young and strong man. He wasn't tall, and his muscles were bulging. His eyes were flickering with red light. Just by looking at his appearance, one could feel that he was very bloodthirsty and cruel. Apart from the 4 demonic emperors, there was also an old man in a black robe standing on the reef. With just a glance at him, I felt an indescribable pressure. His long black robe was like a black cloud that filled the sky, squeezing my eyes and enveloping my entire body. I felt that something was wrong, so I hastily closed my eyes. After circulating my demon power in my body, I woke up from the illusion. However, I still felt a sweetness in my mouth as I spat out a mouthful of black blood. Previously, I had guessed that the Black Dragon King's cultivation definitely wasn't lower than Pu Lai's. The current situation had completely confirmed my guess. He didn't even move from where he was. I had only taken a glance at him, but I was already severely injured. It was really hard to imagine what realm his cultivation had reached. Pu Lai was the first to land on the reef island. After being dazed for a moment, I suppressed the shock in my heart and landed together with him. When I reached the reef island, I was still silently sizing up the Black Dragon King. His figure was tall and honest. His face seemed to have experienced the ravages of countless years, leaving behind many wrinkles on his face. Traces of time could be seen in every wrinkle. When I first saw him from the sky, I felt an overwhelming pressure pressing down on me. However, when I looked at him from his side, I didn't feel that overbearing aura anymore. I only felt that he was no different from an ordinary old man. While I was observing the Black Dragon King, Pu Lai cupped his hands towards the other demonic emperors and smiled. "Everyone is early." Hearing his greeting, the other 4 demonic emperors smiled in response. The few of them seemed to be rather close. However, just as they were chatting happily, the Black Dragon King retracted his gaze from the distant sea and said indifferently, "It's getting late. Let's get ready to begin." His voice wasn't loud, but his tone seemed to carry endless vicissitudes and sorrow. This feeling was rather familiar, but I couldn't recall when I had interacted with him before. When the other demonic emperors heard the Black Dragon King's voice, they all stopped talking. Pu Lai was the first to smile and nod his head. "Let's begin." Upon saying that, he immediately sat down. The other demonic emperors moved to surround him before sitting down as well. I looked at the situation in front of me that was completely different from when the other ferocious beasts had awakened. I didn't know what to do and could only stand there blankly. The Black Dragon King was also standing with me. His gaze was still fixed on the distant sea, as though the ceremony in front of him had nothing to do with him. After the 4 demonic emperors sat down, they formed a ball with their hands in front of them. After a short moment, 4 pure demonic powers appeared. When the golden radiance of the original demonic powers filled the ball that they formed, the 4 of them pulled their hands together at the same time. The ball of original demonic powers formed a long golden line. The demonic emperor of the wolf race, Crew, was the first to stand up and toss the golden line towards Pu Lai's head. That golden line didn't fly far, but hovered above Pu Lai's head. It was parallel to the ground as it steadily floated in mid-air. Following that, the sturdy man from the sand lizard race also stood up and casually tossed the golden line in his hand out. This time, when the golden line reached Pu Lai's head, it stood vertically and connected with Crew's golden line, forming a right angle. After that, Wu Juzui and the demon sovereign of the Kuanping race stood up at the same time. The 2 of them also threw out the golden threads in their hands. Similarly, 1 horizontal and 1 vertical, they connected with the previous 2 golden threads, forming a vertical golden rectangle that floated above Prior's head. After they had completed everything, Pu Lai, who had his eyes closed, abruptly stood up from the ground. There wasn't any golden line in his hand, but there was a ball of white light that was flickering. After he stood up, the golden rectangle that was originally floating above his head landed in front of him. He then forcefully sent the ball of white light that was flickering in his hand into the golden rectangle. When the 2 met, an intense spatial aura burst forth. A rainbow light flickered in the golden rectangle. A few seconds later, it had formed a door. The few demonic emperors had been busy for such a long time. It was obvious that they had joined hands to create a teleportation door. Could it be that the Chaos Beast was behind this teleportation door? Just as this thought popped up in my mind, Pu Lai and the other 4 demonic emperors took a few steps back simultaneously. Then, they cupped their fists and pointed at the teleportation door. "Both of you, please." The Black Dragon King took the lead and walked towards the teleportation door, while I was stunned. When Pu Lai and the rest looked at me, I realized that apart from Pu Lai and the 4 demonic emperors, there was only the Black Dragon King and me. The both of you that they were referring to were obviously the 2 of us. This situation was completely out of my expectations. What was the situation inside the teleportation door? What did they do after entering? I didn't know any of these. In a moment of desperation, I turned to look at Pu Lai in an attempt to get an answer from him. Pu Lai obviously knew that I was perplexed. After seeing my gaze, he smiled and said, "The Chaos Beast is inside the door. Only those who possess the power of chaos can enter. Don't worry. With the Black Dragon King around, nothing will happen. You just have to follow him and do whatever he does." Hearing him say that, I felt a little relieved. At this moment, the Black Dragon King had already walked to the teleportation door. He turned to glance at me and said, "Hurry up and follow him." Upon saying that, he took the first step into the teleportation door. With a flash of white light, the Black Dragon King's figure completely disappeared. I focused my attention and looked inside. Apart from the white light and the faint flickering rainbow light, I couldn't see anything else in the teleportation gate. In actual fact, with such an intense spatial aura fluctuation, the other side of the teleportation door could be thousands of miles away. It could even be a space that didn't belong to this world. It was impossible to see anything from the outside. Chapter 989. Speaking of the power of space, when I was still cultivating, I had found a limitless formation in the Fire God Temple. It was a large space formation that used the power of space in the heaven-measuring ruler. After entering it, one could instantly travel 1,000 miles from my hometown to the Fire God Temple in Shenangjia. Even with my current cultivation, I couldn't achieve the ability to travel 1,000 miles in an instant. The teleportation gate in front of him should have a similar ability. from the white light flashing on it, it seemed to be even stronger than the limitless formation. Taking a step in, it was very likely that he would be able to travel thousands of kilometers. As I thought about that, I looked around after stepping through the gate. I wanted to see where I was, but I didn't expect that after a few seconds, my surroundings were still filled with white light. Besides the Black Dragon King who was standing in front of me, I couldn't see anything else. While I was bewildered, the Black Dragon King suddenly turned around. He didn't seem to be concerned about the surrounding situation. He just stared at me and asked, "Are you the person that Ing Long mentioned?" My heart thumped. The snake spirit had Ing Long's bloodline. The Ing Long that he mentioned was naturally the snake spirit. I thought that the Black Dragon King wouldn't find any clues, but I didn't expect him to ask me directly. Facing an expert like the Black Dragon King, any lies would be futile. I could only hope that his standpoint wasn't completely in line with the monster domain. Thus, I calmed myself down and nodded. "That's right." As soon as I said that, the white light in our surroundings suddenly disappeared. However, the area beneath our feet and around us was still silvery white. However, it wasn't white light, but snow and ice. It was obvious that we had come to a land of ice and snow. There was a thick layer of ice beneath our feet, and we were surrounded by snow-capped mountains. Unexpectedly, the Black Dragon King didn't ask about my identity, but lifted his head to survey the surroundings. He quickly pointed in a direction and walked in that direction. I hurriedly followed after them, but when I turned around to look behind me, I didn't see any traces of the teleportation gate. I didn't know how we were going to return. The Black Dragon King was walking towards the only narrow pass without any snow-capped mountains. Following him out of the narrow pass, a vast valley appeared in front of them. It was also completely covered in ice and snow, and it was impossible to tell whether it was land or glaciers below. The valley covered an area of tens of square kilometers. The Black Dragon King took 2 steps and reached the center of the valley. Then, he lifted his foot and stomped on the ground. The layer of ice below him instantly broke into a large pit and cracked in all directions. I craned my neck to take a look. The bottom of the hole was a patch of dark water. White smoke rose from the water. I guessed it was because the temperature under the ice was higher than above. Judging from this puddle, the valley we were in wasn't land, but a lake. It was just that it was frozen all year round, so it looked like a valley. After creating an ice cave, the Black Dragon King didn't do anything else. He flew to the entrance of the cave and sat down cross-legged, closing his eyes. I didn't know what to do, so I followed him and sat down on the other side of the ice cave. However, I didn't close my eyes. I released my spirit sense to check the water under the ice cave. As soon as I released my spirit sense, I furrowed my brows. Generally speaking, the spiritual awareness could penetrate any object, but the water in this ice lake seemed to have some hindrance to the spiritual awareness. Just as it entered the water, the speed of the spiritual awareness was greatly reduced. The spiritual awareness that could cover the surroundings in an instant after it spread out was like a snail crawling in this ice water. After a long time, it could only cover a distance of a few meters. However, even though it was just a few meters, I still felt a familiar aura. It was similar to the shaman energy I had cultivated before, but it was also different. I guessed it was the chaotic power. Since I had sensed the chaotic power, the primordial chaos beast should be in this icy water. I was elated and tried to use my spirit sense to communicate with the primordial chaos beast. I didn't want the Black Dragon King to recognize me when the primordial chaos beast recognized me. However, I didn't expect that in the next 2 hours, I couldn't find the primordial chaos beast even though I had sent my spirit sense dozens of kilometers into the icy water. I just felt that the primordial chaos aura was thicker than before. Just as I was frowning, the Black Dragon King suddenly opened his eyes. He didn't look in my direction, nor did he look at the bottom of the ice cave. Instead, he raised his head and looked towards the sky. I followed his gaze and looked up. It was noon, and the sun was hovering in the middle of the sky. The golden sunlight shone down from the vault of heaven and shone into the ice cave beneath us. The sunlight that could not be more ordinary in the past seemed to have some magical power in this world of ice and snow. After the golden sunlight entered the ice cave, the originally black water below was dyed gold almost instantly. However, this warm color didn't bring any heat. Instead, it seemed to have sucked away the heat. The water, which was still liquid before, quickly condensed and crystallized at the same time as it was dyed gold. Soon, it formed a condensed columnar golden crystal. These golden crystals didn't exist for long. After a few minutes, there was a rumbling sound from somewhere deep in the ice cave. There was also the sound of something cracking. At first, the sound was vague, but it gradually became clearer. When it reached my ears, the bottom of the cave suddenly exploded. Countless golden ice crystals scattered like snowflakes. At the same time, a golden egg-like object with a diameter of around 2 meters flew out of the ice cave and hovered in the air. I focused my eyes and saw that it wasn't a golden egg. It was a massive mass of air with a thick layer of golden gas. Golden light sparkled inside, and I could vaguely see a living creature. If I wasn't wrong, it was the beast of primordial chaos. I tried to send my soul consciousness into it, but it was the same situation as before. My soul consciousness couldn't enter the mass of air, and I couldn't contact the beast of primordial chaos. While I was doing my best to send out my spiritual sense, the Black Dragon King extended his hand and grabbed the ball of air. It was as if he was scooping up water. He grabbed a ball of golden air from the top and observed it for a moment. Afterwards, he inhaled with his nose and washed it into his body. It was obvious that the golden gas was the power of primordial chaos. After absorbing it, it could increase one's cultivation base. I originally thought that the Black Dragon King would absorb all of the primal chaos power, but I didn't expect that after he took a breath, he would raise his head and say to me, "Try to absorb this mist into your body. It will be greatly beneficial to your cultivation." What he said surprised me. I looked at him suspiciously. The Black Dragon King pointed at the golden mass of air in front of us and gestured to me again. After confirming that he wasn't joking with me, I didn't stand on ceremony. I imitated him and scooped up some of the gas, absorbing it into my stomach. After the pure primordial chaos origin entered my body, I didn't need to deliberately absorb it as it directly flowed into my limbs and bones. In just a short moment, I felt that my cultivation base had increased by a large margin. Although I had advanced to the Monster Emperor realm with the power of the monster originated from the primordial chaos origin. My body's instincts made me want to continue absorbing it, but I tried my best to restrain myself. I didn't extend my hand, but looked at the Black Dragon King. The strange thing was that when he saw my inquisitive gaze, he didn't hesitate and gestured for me to continue absorbing. No matter what his motive was, my body's instinctive greed didn't make me hesitate. After receiving his signal, I immediately scooped up a large amount of the golden gas and swallowed it into my stomach. Just like before, after my body rapidly absorbed the primordial chaos origin, I felt that my cultivation base had increased by several fold. I reckoned that I had already reached the 2nd grade Monster Emperor realm. Afterwards, I continued to absorb the golden gas, while the Black Dragon King didn't show any signs of stopping. After I had absorbed the last wisp of the golden gas, the power in my body had increased by several fold. I couldn't tell if I had reached the 3rd grade Monster Emperor realm, but it had definitely surpassed the 2nd grade Monster Emperor realm. Chapter 990. The golden egg under the mist was about a meter in diameter. Its surface was giving off a warm golden light. The eggshell wasn't transparent, but I could still see a black shadow inside. It was wriggling rhythmically like a flickering candlelight or a beating heart. Looking at the golden egg, An expression finally appeared on the Black Dragon King's calm and old face. It was a kind of joy and excitement that he had to restrain himself. He placed his hand on the golden egg and gently rubbed it. He muttered, "Old friend, we finally meet again." I looked at the scene in front of me confusedly. I couldn't understand. It was rumored that the 4 ferocious beasts had been sealed since ancient times. Could it be that the Black Dragon King was from the ancient times too? At the Monster Emperor realm, one would be immortal. With the Black Dragon King's cultivation, it wasn't impossible for him to live from ancient times until now. Apart from that, the primordial beast was a ferocious beast under the command of Monster Emperor Ling. From the Black Dragon King's power, he obviously wasn't on the same side as Monster Emperor Ling. From what I understood, he should be on the same side as the Yen Emperor's clan, which was the witch race. As I thought about this, the Black Dragon King withdrew his hand. He raised his head to look at me and said solemnly, "I won't be able to open the golden egg by myself. I'll need your help." I nodded. "Please instruct me." After getting my promise, the Black Dragon King didn't hurry to tell me what to do. Instead, he pointed at the golden egg and asked, "Do you know what's inside the golden egg?" I frowned. "Isn't it a primordial beast?" The Black Dragon King stared at me. After staying silent for a while, he replied, "Of course it's a primordial beast. But apart from the primordial beast, there's something else." I couldn't guess what he was trying to hide, so I didn't think too much about it. I just looked at him and waited for him to reveal the answer. This time, the Black Dragon King was silent for a long time. He turned his gaze to the golden egg and reached out to touch it. Suddenly, he sighed and continued, "If you sense it carefully, you should be able to sense that there is an energy greater than heaven and earth in this eggshell. This energy is not something that chaos beasts can possess." As I listened to his words, I sank deeper into doubt. The so-called heaven and earth referred to this world. How could such a thing exist in this world? Although I was thinking about this, I couldn't help but release my spiritual sense to check the golden egg. When my spiritual sense came in contact with the golden egg's shell, it was met with great resistance, just like before. It was difficult to enter. The seemingly thin eggshell was like a locked door, blocking me from entering. After a moment of stalemate, the door seemed to recognize my identity and lifted the restriction. My spiritual sense suddenly rushed into the eggshell. A dazzling 7-colored light flashed in my consciousness. Then, the light dispersed, revealing a pitch-black night sky in front of me. Countless stars twinkled in the night sky, and among the stars there were some nebulas. I focused on one of the nebulas. Together with the tens of thousands of stars around it, it looked like a diagram of a galaxy that I had seen in my textbooks when I was young. A galaxy was a place in the universe where matter was denser. It was a system formed by a large number of stars and other matter. For example, the Milky Way. I looked around. Besides the one in front of me, there were countless other galaxies like this one. After getting over the initial numbness, I quickly realized that the inside of the golden egg in my spiritual sense seemed to contain a whole universe. Of course, I didn't think that it was a real universe. However, my doubts about the Black Dragon King's words were gone. It seemed that there was a power greater than heaven and earth in this world. After getting my spiritual sense out of the golden egg, I looked at the Black Dragon King with awe and respect. The Black Dragon King's gaze was gentle. He chuckled and asked me, "What do you see?" "The universe," I answered honestly. The Black Dragon King's expression froze for a moment. It seemed that my answer had exceeded his expectations. However, he quickly shook his head and said, "When everyone sees the origin of primal chaos, the scene that appears in front of them is different. I see this world, but what you see is the universe." After saying that, he smiled wryly. It seemed that he was mocking himself. As for me, I was completely dumbfounded. The source of chaos? The Black Dragon King meant that the source of chaos was in this golden egg? Prior had told me that I could peek at the source of chaos through the Chaos Beast, but he hadn't told me that the Chaos Beast was with the source of chaos. The Black Dragon King didn't seem to mind my astonishment. He seemed to have recovered from his previous emotions. He pointed at the golden egg and continued to tell me, the primal Chaos Beast and the source of primal chaos are born together. After being sealed for so many years, the two of them have almost fused into one, forming a new and complete source of primal chaos. If we want to separate it from the source of chaos, we can only replace it with something else. What do I have to do exactly? You only have to sit cross-legged next to the golden egg and place both of your hands on the eggshell. Try your best to sense the location of the Chaos Beast and act as its guide. As for the rest, just leave it to me. The Black Dragon King didn't explain too much to me. He only told me that I had to be responsible for a part of it. I roughly understood what he meant. What I had to do was to establish a connection with the Chaos Beast. At the same time, I would act as a coordinate so that the Chaos Beast would take the initiative to come out in my direction. I was secretly delighted with this task. Originally, I was worried about how to avoid the Black Dragon King from communicating with the Chaos Beast. Now, the task that he had put me in charge of could almost solve that problem perfectly. Since I was in charge of establishing a connection with the Chaos Beast, I would have the opportunity to communicate with it the moment I came into contact with it. During this process, the Black Dragon King wouldn't be able to detect it. After receiving the order, I sat cross-legged next to the golden egg. I followed the Black Dragon King's instructions and placed both of my hands on the eggshell. The Black Dragon King stood on the other side of the eggshell. He placed his hands on the eggshell as well. The moment he placed his hands on the eggshell, he suddenly disappeared. In his place was a golden ball of light. This golden ball of light emitted a dazzling golden light as if it was a sun. It was obvious that he had released all of his cultivation base. Each beam of golden light on the ball of light was the power in his body. The ball of light only glowed for a moment before dimming. However, when I looked at it, I found that the ball of light didn't dim at all. All of the light was gathering toward the golden egg, creating a dazzling beam of light that shone directly into the golden egg. This beam of light didn't seem to be obstructed by the eggshell. It directly pierced through the eggshell and reached the inside of the golden egg. After piercing through the egg, it reached my palm from the other side, creating a light. After piercing through the entire golden egg, this light dot became very dim. I could only vaguely see a wisp of it. While I was guessing the function of this light dot, my spiritual consciousness suddenly sensed a strange consciousness inside the golden egg. It was exuding a joyful emotion. I was shaken. As I was about to check, I found that my palm on the eggshell had suddenly sunk into the golden egg. As my palm sunk into the egg, the strange consciousness in my spiritual consciousness became clearer. Apparently, this consciousness belonged to the primordial Chaos Beast. I hurried to increase my spiritual consciousness to communicate with it. However, I couldn't receive its message. I could only feel that its joyful emotion was becoming clearer and stronger. While I was trying to communicate with it, my palm had completely pierced through the eggshell and sunk into the golden egg. However, the surface of the eggshell wasn't damaged at all. It looked as if it had naturally grown on my wrist. This situation made me flustered. However, I didn't have time to do anything. I saw a pair of hands emerge from the top of the eggshell. They looked very familiar. They were exactly the same as my hands, but they didn't have the color of flesh. Instead, they were crystal clear. While I was panic-stricken, I remembered what the Black Dragon King had said. If you want to separate it from the primordial Chaos Beast, you have to use something else to replace it. He wanted to send me in to replace the primordial Chaos Beast and separate it from the eggshell. Chapter 991. When a person had limitless time but lost everything else, what would he do to pass the time? On the second day after entering the golden egg, I began to ponder about this question. The Black Dragon King had said that the origin of primal chaos that everyone saw was different, which meant that it was just an illusion. However, after entering the interior of the golden egg, I realized that the situation was exactly the same as what I had seen with my spiritual awareness. There wasn't any difference. In the vast and boundless universe, I randomly chose a direction and madly sprinted for an entire day at my fastest speed. After that, I continued to observe the surrounding nebulae, but I realized that my relative position hadn't changed at all. After confirming this point, I stopped in my tracks. After that, I tried many more things. In this vast space that was like a universe, I didn't feel any power restriction. I could use my cultivation without any hindrance, and I could also use magic treasures like the Xianyuan sword without any hindrance. However, no matter what I did, I couldn't make any waves in this place. Everything around me was extremely calm, and only I, a living thing, was struggling pointlessly. After I tried everything that I could do, I still didn't discover anything. Only then did I finally calm down and float in the pitch-black emptiness. After many years of cultivation, my willpower had already been forged to be incomparably firm. Even the absurd situation before me wasn't enough to make me collapse. Looking at the boundless night sky, I could basically confirm that I definitely wouldn't be able to leave this place in a short period of time. Thus, I started to ponder about what I should do next. I had already tried everything that I could, so there was no meaning in repeating it. I could only think in a direction that was beyond my current capabilities. For cultivators, anything that was beyond their power could be summed up in a single reason, and that was that their cultivation was insufficient. Thus, even though Prior had told me that the Monster Emperor's cultivation could only be increased by searching for the origin of power, I was still prepared to use the traditional method to try. After all, this was the location of the origin of primal chaos. As it turned out, my guess wasn't wrong. I closed my eyes and used my spiritual awareness to gradually expand in all directions. Very quickly, I sensed the existence of the origin of power in the vast universe. This power was scattered in all directions and couldn't be seen with the naked eye. However, in my spiritual awareness, I could see the existence of the origin of power, as though there were countless stars in the vault of heaven. With something to do, the days wouldn't be too difficult. I let go of everything and suppressed all the other thoughts in my heart. Every day, I would crazily absorb the original power that was wandering in the world. During this process, the stars changed and time flew. I didn't know how much time had passed, but when I opened my eyes again, everything was the same as before. However, the power source in my body had undergone a drastic change. Compared to before, it had increased by nearly 100 times. Moreover, during the process of cultivation, the original power source in my body had completely transformed into the power source of primal chaos after absorbing the power source of primal chaos. Judging from the scale, I felt that the current me shouldn't be inferior to Pu Lai. In other words, I was at least a 4th-grade demon sovereign. After gaining some confidence, I woke up and started to explore the surroundings. I didn't randomly choose a direction and crazily advance like before. Instead, I raised my head and observed all the twinkling stars in the surroundings. I chose the brightest star and flew towards it. Everyone knew that in the universe, every twinkling star was a star that emitted light. The one that seemed to be the brightest was obviously the one that was closest to you. This time, I controlled my speed to be around 70 to 80% of the fastest speed that I could reach. The distance in the universe was measured in light years. This was a distance unit that exceeded the imagination of humans. Even if I could approach the speed of light, the time needed to travel would still be measured in years. Hence, I had already prepared myself to travel for a long period of time. In the absolute loneliness of the universe, time was something that didn't exist. I numbly advanced forward. After the power in my body was exhausted, I rested for a short while and absorbed the power source in the surroundings before continuing to advance. Again and again, over and over again. Gradually, in my field of vision, the star in the direction of my destination became brighter. Furthermore, the starlight wasn't as cold as before, but had a tinge of warmth. I knew that the distance between me and the star wasn't that far anymore. In my excitement, I sped up a little and continued running towards this star. After over 100 times of exhausting and reabsorbing my original power, the star in front of me had become a true star. Although it still looked like it was only the size of a fist, its appearance had already become that of a sun. Moreover, I could clearly see the numerous satellites orbiting around it. At that moment, I was already close to the outermost planet. However, the direction that I had come from wasn't in the current orbit of the planet. Since the distance between us was quite far, I didn't choose to go to the outermost planet. Instead, I continued to advance towards a planet that was reflecting sunlight. After consuming and absorbing power over a dozen times, I finally arrived at the outer region of the planet. This was an enormous blue planet with an atmosphere. When I first saw it, I was delighted. However, I quickly realized that the surface of the planet didn't have any land. It was completely covered by the ocean. It couldn't possibly be Earth. When I was walking in the dark and lonely universe, I couldn't feel my speed. But now, with the blue planet in front of me as a reference, I realized that my speed had already reached a terrifying realm. With just a few steps, I entered the planet's atmosphere. After another few steps, I followed the direction of the planet's rotation and landed on a boundless ocean. The ocean here was different from Earth. Although it looked like the same azure-blue ocean, the seawater here had a pungent smell. There weren't any signs of living beings either. Although the environment here was different from the one I was familiar with, I was still on a planet. It was far more comfortable than the dark and empty universe. Hence, I floated on the surface of the ocean and continued to cultivate. Countless years had passed, but without any reference, everything was meaningless. When I opened my eyes again, regardless of whether it was the surrounding seawater or myself, they were still the same as before. It was as though only an instant had passed. Only the primal chaos origin in my body that had grown a few hundred times stronger became the only evidence to determine the existence of time. I stood up and flew into the sky. Very quickly, I left the planet and continued to travel in the direction of the sun. Very quickly, I arrived at another planet that was closer to the sun. The environment of this planet was completely different from the previous one. There wasn't a trace of water vapor on the surface. There was only a desolate desert and countless bare mountain ranges with a loose geological structure. Moreover, the mountain ranges were extremely low. The tallest one only reached my knees. I didn't know if it was because the geological structure of this planet was like this or if my body had become extremely tall. Such a barren planet couldn't attract me to stay. Very quickly, I stood up and left. This time, I didn't continue to travel to the center of the galaxy. Instead, I quickly left and headed to the other nearby stars. There was still no concept of time in the universe. However, in my consciousness, the time spent this time was much shorter than before. Before my mind had become numb, I arrived at the second galaxy. There were dozens of planets orbiting around this star. The landforms of these planets were completely different. Two of them were even close to the ratio of land and ocean on Earth. However, there wasn't any life on them. They were lonely and empty, no different from the darkness of the universe. After walking through 2 galaxies, I still didn't discover anything. Hence, I didn't waste any more time. I chose a planet that had a landform similar to Earth and landed on it. Then, I entered my cultivation state again. Chapter 992. When I opened my eyes, I was elated. This was the first time that I had felt movement other than my own ever since I had entered this universe. However, when I flew into the sky, I realized that there weren't any other intelligent life forms. The earth-shattering commotion had been caused by the collision of the two planets. I didn't know why, but the orbit of the planet that I had been on had deviated. It had moved towards the direction of the star and collided with the other planet in the inner orbit. The huge energy brought about by the collision caused all the water vapor and dust on the two planets to fly up, forming a huge dust atmosphere that completely enveloped the two entangled planets. If one of the planets had been replaced with Earth, such a collision could have easily wiped out all civilization on Earth. However, in this universe, I didn't feel the slightest bit of shock as I looked at everything in front of me. This calmness wasn't only due to my current state of mind, but also because I realized that the planet in front of me seemed to be very small. The so-called small wasn't due to the visual effect caused by the distance between us. It was small in the truest sense of the word. It looked to be only 10 times the size of my body. Even if the two planets were to collide, they wouldn't be more than 10 times the size of me. In reality, when I had first arrived on this planet, I couldn't even be considered as an ant on an elephant compared to this planet. In such a short period of time, as a celestial body in the universe, it was impossible for this planet to become smaller. The only explanation was that I had become bigger. Using this reasoning, there was an explanation for the collision of the two planets. As I had become bigger to the size of the planet itself, the overall mass of the planet had increased. At the same time, the gravitational force between the planet and the star had also increased. Hence, it had moved towards the inner orbit of the star and finally collided with the other planet in the inner orbit. If the scale of this universe was no different from Earth, I would be a true giant when I returned to Earth with my current appearance. Mount Everest wouldn't even be as tall as one of my fingers. In reality, when I had been in the previous solar system, I had noticed that the mountains there weren't even as tall as my knees. At that time, I had thought that it was because of the unique topography of the planet. However, it seemed that it was because my body had become extremely tall. From the changes before and after, my body's change should be related to the chaos origin that I had absorbed. As the chaos origin in my body increased, my body would become bigger and bigger. Currently, I was already close to the size of an ordinary planet. If I continued to absorb, I might even exceed the size of a planet and reach stellar level. If such a strange thing happened on Earth, I would definitely think of a way to solve it. In reality, changing my body wasn't a big deal. However, I didn't need to think too much about this problem here. I just needed to not stay on the planet and cultivate in outer space to avoid being interrupted again. Thus, I flew out of the solar system. After I had reached outer space, I continued to sit cross-legged and continued to absorb the chaos origin. In outer space, the absorption of the origin of chaos seemed to be a little faster. Countless origin energy was absorbed into his body, and very soon, it exceeded the original storage in his body. Then, it continued to accumulate, from tens to hundreds of times, to thousands of times. This time, my goal was to absorb at least 10,000 times the Chaos Origin's power before opening my eyes to explore my surroundings. This time, there was still an accident. I continuously felt some things colliding with my body. However, as these things weren't big and didn't cause me any harm, I didn't pay attention to them. I didn't even open my eyes to look at them. Instead, I continued to cultivate. I only opened my eyes when I had reached the target of 10,000 times the Chaos Origin's power. My surroundings were as quiet as before. However, what was strange was that I discovered that there were dozens of pebbles and air masses revolving around my body. They were like planets that were moving in a circular motion. There were also countless pebbles attached to my body, as though I was buried in a pile of rocks. I extended my hand and grabbed one of the pebbles that was revolving around me. After holding it in my hand and taking a closer look, I discovered that it wasn't a pebble, but a solid planet. It was mainly made up of rocks and dust, but there was also some solid ice. It didn't look much different from the planets that I had been to before. After looking at a few pebbles, I gradually understood. These pebbles were real planets. My current body should have already reached the fixed star rank. While I was sitting cross-legged and cultivating, due to my enormous mass, I had captured some of the dust in the surrounding space. At the beginning, many of the things that were attracted to me had collided with my body. That was the reason why I had noticed the collisions during my cultivation. Apart from the parts that had collided with my body, other cosmic dust with kinetic energy had gathered and fused around my body. In the end, it had formed a new star system. At first glance, this speculation seemed absurd. However, when I reached the nearest star, everything was confirmed. The planets in this star system were also in the shape of pebbles when I held them in my hand. As for the previously incomparably huge star, even if I were to stick close to it, I would discover that it was only a few times bigger than my body. My body had already reached the fixed star rank. This meant that the vast space in the universe had shrunk countless times to me. Thus, I chose another direction and attempted to explore the end of this space. I only needed to take one step and I would be able to rush from one star to the next. This time, I was extremely confident and felt that it wouldn't be difficult to find a way out. After I had taken hundreds of thousands of steps, there was still a sea of dazzling stars in front of me. Only then did I stop with a bitter smile. Even for a star, the universe was too vast. I had no choice but to sit cross-legged on the spot and continue to absorb the origin of chaos. With my current body, when I absorbed the origin of chaos, the surrounding space would tremble. In the nearby star systems, the originally stable star systems would instantly become chaotic. When I opened my eyes again, I discovered that there were tens of thousands of small suns hanging on my body. Every sun was a real star. Their planets had completely disappeared. What was left were the stars that looked like fireflies in my eyes, constantly floating around my body. There were many types of stars in the universe. Although they were all in motion, most of the stars that formed their own systems could basically be seen as static. Now, these tens of thousands of stars had all become planets, or rather satellites, that had been captured by my body. From this point of view, I should have become the largest celestial body in the universe. According to my previous plan, I would once again attempt to explore the edge of the universe to find a way out. However, looking at the scene before me, I faintly realized that the direction I was looking for a way out wasn't right. Just as I stood up, I sat back down again. Without much thought, I closed my eyes and entered a new round of cultivation. This time, I had completely thrown away the restrictions. I didn't have time to think, nor did I think about the amount of origin of chaos in my body. I just cultivated numbly and calmly. When I realized that there was no longer any origin of chaos for me to absorb, I finally opened my eyes again. Everything had disappeared. There were no small suns, no galaxies or nebulas. Even the surrounding darkness wasn't as pure as before. Instead, it had become misty. Up and down, left and right, front and back, everything had turned into chaos. In this chaos, I could faintly see some dust fragments, which seemed to be the residue left behind by the previous universe. Looking at everything in front of me, I opened my mouth and took in a long breath. The misty chaos, which was wrapped in indistinct specks of dust, entered my mouth as I moved. In the next second, I exhaled a long breath. A gray mist appeared from my mouth and dispersed into the surroundings, shattering into starlight. The starlight was like a dagger of time, which pierced through the void of the universe. Countless dazzling golden rays of light came from the distant sky, forming a sharp sword that sliced the heaven and earth into two. Below were the rivers and mountains, and above were the sun and stars. Chapter 993. When the golden light in front of me disappeared, the extreme darkness in the universe finally collapsed. As the golden light faded, white light began to appear in front of me. In this light of dawn, I could vaguely see a singer in a green robe standing on the peak of the mountain. He looked up at me and sang, "In the beginning of time, who taught, without form, how to test? Ming Zhao Yu, who can reach the extreme? Feng Yi is only an image, how to recognize? Obviously, he is Yi, but what is time? Yin and Yang are three, what is the origin and what is the transformation? Circle has 9 layers, who can pass through? What merit is this, what is the beginning? What is the connection, what is the end of heaven? What are the 8 pillars, what is the loss of the southeast? In the 9 heavens, where to settle? There are many corners, who knows the number? What is the limit of heaven? What is the division of 12? Sun and moon? Sun and moon? The song went from near to far, gradually fading away. The singer in the green robe disappeared, and the white light in front of me became brighter. There was no sunlight, and the bright white light came from the reflection of the ice. I was still standing on the frozen lake, but there was no hole around me, and the golden egg was nowhere to be seen. Instead, there were many short grass with 4 petals on the ice. In the grass, there was a bald man kneeling on the ground. His upper body and head were pressed against the ice, and his body was trembling. He didn't even dare to lift his head to look at me. He was only mumbling something. I frowned and found information about this person from my dusty memories. He was Wu Juzui's son, Wu Huan. I had fought with him back then. Why are you here? After experiencing the endless years of loneliness, my voice had become empty and cold, as though the vanished universe had been corroded by the netherworld. Hearing my question, Wu Huan lifted his body slightly, but he still didn't lift his head. He replied in a fearful voice, "I'm here to pick the acacia leaf." Acacia leaf? I looked at the short grass on the ice and realized that the shape of the grass was familiar. After searching through my memories, Vivian's figure appeared in my mind. Back then, she had asked me to find the longevity grass, and she had described the appearance of the grass in front of me. This is the longevity grass. Why do you call it the acacia leaf? Wu Huan immediately replied. The yearning leaf was another name for it. I didn't ask Wu Huan again, but a beautiful legend of the monster domain appeared in my mind. There were thousands of races in the demon realm, and among them, the race with the shortest lifespan was the mayfly race of the southern province. It was said that their lifespan was only a day, and all of them were female. In such a short period of time, there wasn't even enough time for them to experience the entire process of birth, aging, sickness, and death. As such, mayfly beings were born with the appearance of beautiful young women, and their appearances wouldn't change in the slightest even after their deaths. Everything had 2 extremes. Since there were races that lived and died in the demon realm, there were also races that lived forever. The jellyfish race in the Eastern Sea region was one such lucky race. There was a huge difference in lifespans between the 2 races, but there were similarities in terms of gender. Just like the mayfly race, the jellyfish race was also a monogamous race, and all of them were male. The distance between the southern province and the Eastern Sea region was not far, but there was the Ruoshui Lake in between. The short lifespan of the mayfly race wasn't enough for them to get to know many of their fellow race members, let alone the sea race that was thousands of miles away. However, this was where the miracle of creation was shown. The Ruoshui Lake was connected to the Eastern Sea region. Every 200 years there would be a high tide period that lasted for a day. Under the strong pushing force of the seawater, some of the Eastern Sea race would travel along the Ruoshui Lake to the depths of the inner region. After taking a quick glance, they would return to their habitats with the ebbing tide. The high tide period that happened once every 200 years was a rare sightseeing experience for the sea race that had a long lifespan. However, to the mayfly race that lived and died, it was a miracle that only existed in legends. Fortunately, this miracle was real. Many, many years ago, a beautiful and lucky mayfly race girl personally saw the Ruoshui Lake during a high tide period. In the eyes of the petite and light mayfly race girl, the only difference between the surface of the Ruoxue Lake and the sky was that the sky could only be seen, while the surface of the Ruoxue Lake could be stepped on. Almost every member of the mayfly race spent their entire lives on the surface of the Ruoxue Lake. In their short lives there were no other emotions, only endless happiness. They played and frolicked on the surface of the lake, and their greatest fear came from the ugly fish in the water. However, to the lithe and light mayfly race girls with a pair of transparent wings, this kind of fear was nothing. They could easily fly and avoid the jumping or breathing of the ugly fish, then they could happily laugh at these ugly monsters. However, life wasn't always so peaceful and happy. Not long after the legendary lucky mayfly race girl was born, the Ruoxue Lake suddenly changed. The surface of the lake, which had always been as calm as the sky, suddenly began to churn. Even the large and ugly fish at the bottom of the lake were tossed into the air, wailing in pain. All of the mayfly maidens flew up into the air. Even for them who were filled with joy, this apocalyptic scene was a little too frightening. There was a constant stream of mayfly maidens who fell from exhaustion and disappeared into the churning lake water. In the midst of such a disaster, the lucky mayfly race girl saw a youth floating on the surface of the water. In fact, there were many members of the sea race who came to the inner six during the flood season. However, these large members of the sea race obviously didn't exist in the eyes of the mayfly race's small eyes. They could only see the floating members of the sea race. It was a youth from the jellyfish race. His completely transparent body was like a beautiful miracle in a dream, and even the mayfly race girl felt ashamed of her inferiority. He was the most senior member of the flood season sightseeing group. In his long life, 200 years was nothing more than an instant. Even he himself couldn't remember how many times he had come to the depths of the inner six. Thus, when he saw the mayfly race girl, his heart didn't waver in the slightest. He only smiled faintly and turned his gaze elsewhere. In fact, even if he wanted to, he couldn't. The movement of the water was relative to his small body, and every second was a new world to him. This was the significance of sightseeing. How long was 1 second? For the jellyfish race boy, it wasn't even an instant. But for the lucky mayfly race girl, 1 second was long enough for her to sink into that beautiful and transparent dream. She forgot about time and everything else. When the clansmen around her fell into the churning lake, she still flew freely. Even when the tide receded and she landed on the surface of the lake again, and a new generation of clansmen was born around her, she was still in a state of oblivion. The power of this oblivion was so strong that she forgot about death. The Ruoxue Lake became peaceful again. The mayfly race girl who had been forgotten by time was no longer happy. She also forgot to laugh and just waited calmly. Time flew by in the blink of an eye. Tens of thousands of clansmen were born and died by her side. It was so long that history couldn't even record it. But for her, it was only a short instant. Not only was she forgotten by time, but even the huge and ugly fish at the bottom of the lake forgot to swim around her. Every autumn, the falling leaves would carefully avoid her body. Only the flood season would not change. 200 years later, when the Ruoxue Lake started to churn again, the old and beautiful mayfly race girl had no strength to fly again. In fact, she didn't even think about whether she should fly or not. She just tried her best to look in the direction of the distant sea, looking forward to that beautiful and transparent dream that made people sink into oblivion. On the surface of the water, a new generation of sea race sightseeing group arrived. No one knew whether the mayfly race girl saw that beautiful dream again. They only knew that when a crystal-clear wave came crashing over, the mayfly race girl laughed happily again. The beautiful and old mayfly maiden flew along with the waves and landed on the shore. After the waves receded, there was only a 4-petaled blade of grass left on the ground. Longevity grass, also known as acacia leaf, could increase one's lifespan by 200 years and make one young forever. Please remember this book's original domain name. Mobile version. Chapter 994. The biggest reason why a legend was called a legend was that it was fake. The longevity grass didn't grow in the southern province in the story, but in the northern part of the scattered star sea. There was no mayfly maiden here, only endless ice and snow. I plucked a stalk from the ground and studied it in my hand while asking Wu Huan, "Are you plucking it for Vivian?" Yes, after I entered the Monster Emperor realm, I would come here to pluck one stalk every 200 years. This is the 5th time. I didn't ask further and just lowered my head to look at the longevity grass in my hand. Every stalk of grass had 4 leaves and didn't look eye-catching at all. Every leaf was plump and cute. After staring at the leaves for a while, Vivian's smiling face appeared in my mind. However, the smiling face was fleeting as it quickly turned into Nam's face, Wang Can's face, Zhang Canwen's face and the fatty's face. When it finally stopped, only Tao Wu's perfect figure was left in front of me. I sighed and the coldness in my voice disappeared. I said to Wu Huan, "Why didn't you pluck a few more stalks? Let's pluck a few more stalks back. Vivian should be able to use them." In the past, there would only be 1 stalk here. I wonder if this year, before Wu Huan finished his sentence, I had already stepped out and left the snowy scattered star sea. I arrived at Duoji City, which was situated between the northern province and King's City. This was the King's City of the dog head race's fief. Vivian lived in the Monster Emperor's residence at the center of the city. As expected, she maintained her youthful appearance, but her eyes weren't as clear as before. I glanced at her from afar and didn't stay there any longer. Instead, I walked out of the city. The monster region obviously wasn't the monster region that I remembered. On the main road outside the city, there were a few humans carrying swords among the monster race. Moreover, both parties seemed to have gotten used to each other's existence. The few humans carrying swords were youthful and wore Taoist robes. They seemed to be from the Taoist sect. I walked over and cupped my fist at them. "Fellow Taoists, you seem to be in a hurry. May I know where you are heading to?" The leading young Taoist looked rather friendly. It was probably due to the fact that I was from the human race that he had a smile on his face. Very quickly, he cupped his fist and replied, "Of course, we are going to participate in the 10-direction expiation spell that is hosted by President Li, Sr. Could it be that you didn't come to the monster region to participate in the spell? Old President Li?" Hearing this familiar form of address again made me absent-minded. After a while, I nodded. "I'm a disciple of the Metaphysics Association. Of course, I'm going to participate in the spell assembly." The young Taoist priest laughed again. "So it's a senior from the Metaphysics Association. Since we're all going to participate in the Dharma assembly, why don't we go together? Come, let me introduce to you, senior brother. I'm a sword cultivator disciple of Wangu Grotto Heaven. These senior brothers are disciples under Celestial Master Zhang of Mount Longhu." Sword cultivator? Hearing this familiar word, a smile appeared on my face. The other Taoists next to me said, "We are just disciples of the mysterious altar hall of Mount Longhu. Senior Brother Chen is the direct disciple of Immortal Mo of Wangu Cave. His cultivation base is close to the Yang spirit level, and his future is limitless." Sword cultivator, Taoist Master Mo. The smile on my face grew brighter. I asked Mo's young disciple, "How is your master doing recently?" "Do you know my master? We've had some dealings." "You're so young, how did you come into contact with my master?" "I've never heard my master mention him before." Little Mo's disciple was like Little Mo in the past. His cultivation base was close to the Yang spirit level, and he still had an innocent and pure heart. From him, I learned that today's Wangu Grotto had become the #1 monastery in Taoism. The disciples in the monastery practiced both witchcraft and sword technique. His master, Reverend Mo, was the great elder, and the sect master was Reverend Mi Tai Mi. As for Wang Can, he died at the border between the monster area and the human world before the war between the two worlds, which had lasted for nearly 1,000 years. I was there at that time. More than 10 years later, the war between the two worlds broke out. The human race received a warning from the dragon race, so they set up the first line of defense at the border in advance. Under the situation where there was a great disparity in power between the two sides, Wang Can's father sacrificed himself and scattered his chaos power to seal the monster area for another 100 years. He won precious time for the human race and laid a solid foundation for the final victory. Now that the war between the two worlds had ended, the 10 Directions Expiation Dharma Assembly was held in King City of the Monster area to expiate the billions of souls that had been sacrificed in the war. Wang Can and his father were ranked 2nd and 9th on the list of heroes, and the first on the list of heroes was Lin Hu. 100 years later, the monster area invaded again. At this time, the human race had already produced several immortal emperors. With the addition of the dragon race, the strength of the two sides was close. They entered a stalemate, which lasted for hundreds of years. This was the most tragic stage of the war between the two worlds. The two sides started a tug-of-war at the border. Although the humans were still slightly weaker, their excellent teamwork and rich battle experience allowed them to persevere until now. War was the best catalyst for cultivation. At this stage, millions of cultivators died on the battlefield, but more civilians embarked on the road of cultivation. In the end, even all the human race began to cultivate. The human race officially entered the era of cultivation. The powerful potential of the human race was vividly reflected at this stage. Hundreds of years later, with the birth of a new generation of immortal emperors, the strength gap between the two sides was increasingly narrowed. However, at this time, the 4 beasts of the monster area appeared on the battlefield. The other 3 beasts were only first-grade demon emperors. The human race still had the power to resist, but the strongest among them, the beast of chaos, had the cultivation of more than 5th-grade demon emperors. In one battle, 3 human immortal emperors died. Celestial Master Zhang of Dragon Tiger Mountain was one of them. After the battle, he was ranked 4th on the list of heroes. When the scales of victory tilted towards the monster area again, it was Fatty and Wang Li who stood up. The beast of chaos appeared on the battlefield for the second time. Fatty divined heaven's secrets and kept it in the demon purification gourd. Then, he used his body as a cage and set up a heaven concealment array, causing the beast of chaos to die in his body cage. After that, Wang Li opened the door of the 9 Nether and used his life as the price to trap Fatty's body in the 9 Nether forever. On the list of heroes, Fatty was 1st and Wang Li 3rd. After the battle of the 4 beasts, both the human and demon races suffered great losses. On the whole, the monster area still had a greater advantage. The human race could only exchange space for time and retreat step by step. When half of the human world had fallen, the old president of the Metaphysics Association, Li Liguang, who had been in seclusion for hundreds of years, appeared out of nowhere. With the prowess of a 7th-grade immortal emperor, he killed the master of the monster area, Demon Emperor Per. No one knew how old President Li became a 7th-grade immortal emperor in just a few hundred years. However, after this battle, the monster area lost its leader and was defeated step by step. After paying the price of 2 demon emperors, the 1,000-year war between the two worlds finally came to an end. After the battle, the human race entered the monster area. Other than Monarch City, the original ruling class of the monster area was retained. The two worlds began to have limited exchanges. In the 2nd year after the battle, old President Li personally held the first 10 Directions Expiation Dharma Assembly at the headquarters of the Metaphysics Association. In the 5th year after the battle, The second 10 Directions Expiation Dharma Assembly was held in Monarch City of the Monster area. Old President Lee also personally hosted it. This was the largest gathering between the two worlds in the past 1,000 years. Every family in the monster area had to participate. Every mountain sect of the human race had to send people to pay their respect. The few young people in front of me were the representatives of Wanwu Grotto Heaven and Longhu Mountain. They had set off early in the morning to enjoy the scenery along the way. Their time was just right as they would reach Monarch City in a day's time. Coincidentally, the assembly would be held the next day. It had only been 5 years since the war between the two worlds had ended. At this time, it was the time when the young people were most passionate about the war. Along the way, they patiently talked about every hero on the heroic spirit list. The war that had lasted for 1,000 years naturally couldn't be finished in a day. When they reached Monarch City, they still felt that they hadn't had enough. They agreed to go back together after the assembly. The current Monarch City was still the same as in my memory. 1,000 years hadn't left many traces. I hurriedly glanced at it before I moved to the door of a side hall in the palace. The door of the hall was tightly shut. The furnishings inside were simple and crude. There were only a few stone tables and chairs. There were 2 people sitting on the stone chair in the southwest corner. One was the spirit snake and the other was Tong Tong. The spirit snake was no longer as mischievous as before. Tong Tong's small face was filled with worry. "Little snake, do you think brother will come back?" Chapter 995. I don't know. Regardless of whether he comes back or not, you have to be prepared. After this spell assembly, I will use the power of primal chaos to reconstruct your physical body again. You have to step into the immortal Emperor realm to completely erase the contract from back then. Tong Tong lowered her head and her voice became very soft. But I don't want to erase the contract. I won't be able to feel my brother anymore. The spirit snake sighed. No one knows his current situation, but you have to know that if he's really in danger, he will definitely want you to erase the contract. Tong Tong didn't speak anymore. Her big eyes were filled with tears and stubbornness. I smiled as I pushed the door open and walked in. "Brother?" Tong Tong jumped up from her chair in shock, but she didn't walk over. She just stared at me timidly, her face filled with disbelief. After a moment of silence, the spirit snake next to me regained her composure and asked hesitantly, "You're back?" I continued to look at Tong Tong and nodded at her with a smile. "Yes, I'm back." Brother, Tong Tong was already sobbing this time. She jumped from behind the table and pounced into my embrace. She was so aggrieved that she couldn't say a word and could only sob continuously. 1,000 years had passed and even the spirit snake had become calm. Only Tong Tong was still the little girl who hid in my embrace and looked at the world timidly. "Brother, don't leave me again, okay?" Tong Tong asked me to make a promise immediately after she calmed down from her sobbing. "Of course not. Why would brother leave you?" I rubbed her head lovingly and continued to say gently, "But what the little snake said was right. You need to reconstruct your physical body to truly come to this world." "No, Tong Tong just wants to be with brother." "Silly, brother also wants Tong Tong to be by my side forever, but brother wants to see Tong Tong have her own life. I want to have a real sister like Tong Tong." Tong Tong was silent for a while as though she was thinking. After a long while, she pouted her lips and nodded with grievance. I extended my hand and tapped her forehead. A streak of primal chaos power entered her body, instantly helping her break through the last shackles and enter the Xiaju realm. After that, I needed to reconstruct my body. I thought for a while, then took out a walnut-sized white bead. This is something that Prince Night Zombie gave me back then. I have no other use for it. This bead contained all of Wang Hai's cultivation, and its attribute was extremely compatible with his eyes. Using the power of an ancient great demon to condense a physical body for his eyes was perfect. With a flick of my finger, the white pearl entered Tong Tong's body through my chest, turning her illusory body into a solid one. Tong Tong closed his eyes and tried his best to get used to his physical body. I turned around to look at the spirit snake. How does it feel to finally have a true dragon's body? The snake spirit shook its head. After you disappeared, the dragon tribe sent someone to bring me back. They said that the Black Dragon King had fallen and held a coronation ceremony for me to become the new Dragon King. I successfully transformed into a dragon during that ceremony. After so many years, I'm already used to it. The Black Dragon King had fallen. It seemed that the Black Dragon King had paid a price for awakening the primal chaos beast. Or it could be said that the Black Dragon King had paid a price for me to obtain the primal chaos origin. I didn't continue on this topic, but asked the spirit snake, "Have you paid attention to Nam's news over the past few years?" Nam participated in the war between the two worlds and died in the coast of the East Sea. There was also Bart. He refused to participate in the war and was beaten to death by his grandfather. I nodded and pointed at Tong Tong. After obtaining a physical body, there might be a short period of discomfort. Take good care of her. After leaving the side hall, I walked towards the main hall in the center of the palace. That used to be Prior's bedroom, but it was now President Li's temporary residence. Li Guang wasn't surprised at my appearance. He didn't even ask why I had appeared. He only looked at me for a while before saying, "You haven't informed Qiyu, right? He's not in the monster region. I'll inform him to rush over now." I shook my head. "There's no need. I'll go look for him. I came here because I wanted to see you." Li Guang still looked the same as he did 1,000 years ago, but the calmness on his face had increased. He smiled bitterly. "You want to see how I became a 7th-grade immortal emperor, right?" "That's right." Li Guang shook his head. "Actually, there's nothing strange about this. I've been pursuing longevity my entire life. In my first life, I painstakingly cultivated to the half-step sunset realm before I realized the bottleneck of the human realm. I changed my physical body and struggled at death's door. In my second life, I cultivated to the half-step sunset realm again and even captured the Tai Sui. However, even with the help of Shaman Qi, I still couldn't take that step. In my third life, I went through all the trouble to obtain the Kongtong seal. However, this legendary divine weapon that can make a person immortal and indestructible can only be fully unleashed by an immortal emperor. I wasted 3 lives, and only after I learned of your existence in my 4th life did I finally step onto the right path. After another life, I waited for the opening of the mountain and sea realm. After struggling at death's door for so many years, when I thought about it, I felt like a pitiful person. Who could have imagined that when I finally took that step, I would discover that the fleshly bodies of my 4 lives had also broken through. The origin of Dao Qi is not difficult to find. Every true dragon's vein will more or less have a trace of it. Thus, in these 1,000 years, I became a leech, 5 leeches that sucked up almost all the true dragon's veins in the world. Li Guang chuckled darkly. I was just trying to live forever. The more I absorbed, the more I felt at ease. How could I have imagined that after fusing with the fleshly bodies of 4 lives, I would have such good fortune? Now that I think about it, I have to thank you. After the 4 fleshly bodies rebelled, I sent my disciples to subdue them, and you helped me. After Li Guang finished his story with a bit of pride, his face became gloomy again. He suddenly sighed and said in distress, "It is said that immortal emperors are immortal, but now that I have reached level 7, I don't think it is safe. In this war, 2 monster emperors have fallen by my hands. If I can kill them, how can I be immortal and indestructible?" As he said this, his eyes became unfocused, as if he was talking to himself. He was completely immersed in his obsession. He didn't look like a 7th-grade immortal emperor, but more like a madman. "Do you want to live forever?" Li Guang suddenly raised his head. His eyes shone with a terrifying light. Yes, I want to. I placed my hand on his head. Then I'll give you eternal life. After saying that, I made a grabbing motion with my finger. A seven-colored light was extracted from his body. Li Liguang's body stiffened, and then he collapsed to the ground, becoming a pile of rotten flesh. I took a step forward and left the monster domain. I returned to the human world that I hadn't seen for 1,000 years. This was the downtown area of Shenzhen. Compared to the eternity of the monster domain, the passage of 1,000 years had brought great changes to the human world. When the mountain and sea realm had opened, the human world had undergone a huge change. The current Pring City looked more like a city in the monster domain. There were still many buildings, but there were no skyscrapers that reached the clouds. There were only low-rise buildings made of earth and wood. In the old site of the antique jade market, there was still an antique wooden building. The signboard of the Feng Shui metaphysics shop still hung on the original 3-story wooden building. Zhang Canwen, with his white hair and beard, held a pot of tea in his hand. He stood by the window and looked into the distance. His deep wrinkles hid the traces of 1,000 years. He was only half a step into the sunset realm. I didn't know how he had survived for 1,000 years. I didn't approach him, but just looked at him from afar. With a flick of my finger, I sent the seven-colored light into his body. He was the only one qualified to be the guardian of the human world. After Zhang Canwen fainted, I closed my eyes. Familiar faces flashed through my mind, but I couldn't distinguish the fatties and Wang Li's faces. Even the heavenly Tao couldn't barge into the 9 underworlds. When I opened my eyes again, the sacrificial evil spirit had appeared next to me. Nangong was also by my side. Seeing the two of them, the clear world became blurry again. I rubbed my head and smiled wryly. Where? The sacrificial evil spirit was silent for a while before replying, in front of the grave. In front of the grave. I nodded and disappeared on the spot. After I left, Nangong suddenly knelt on the ground. As his body trembled, he turned into a puddle of blood. The sacrificial evil spirit was still standing in the air. As the wind blew, his body gradually dissipated. The grave where I drank that cup of wine had long since disappeared after thousands of years. Today, on the barren hill at the entrance of the village, a few rows of low bungalows have been built. Chickens and ducks are chirping, children are playing merrily, and the small farmhouse has a thriving atmosphere. I walked to the slope on the other side of the barren hill. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes. The green river appeared under my feet again, and a face shrouded in 7-colored light appeared in front of me. That face was old and familiar. When he saw me, he shouted happily, "You're here." I didn't answer. Instead, I held the sword in my hand tightly and asked, "Are you the heavenly Tao?" "No." The old face swayed strenuously. "You are the heavenly Tao. Then who are you?" "I am you." A vague and distorted feeling surged from the bottom of my heart again. I suddenly became irritated. I raised the sword in my hand and roared, "The one who killed you, Zhou Yi." The old face smiled happily and chanted, "The one who killed you, Zhou Yi." The sword fell, and everything in front of me shattered. I clutched my chest and sat on the ground with difficulty. There was no green river or 7-colored light around me. There was only a small grave mound in front of me. In the haze, a red figure appeared from the mound. She walked in front of me and said softly, "Husband, we are finally together." "Yes, yes, we are finally together." Chapter 996. There will always be regret and happiness, laughter and tears. Too many words were stuck in my throat, but it was difficult to pour them into the tip of the pen. First, I apologize. I really don't want to say this word, but I do blame myself to death in my heart. I'm really sorry for dragging out updates and going back on my words so many times, and I'm really sorry. I'm not capable enough, but I want to be perfect, so I don't dare to say anything in the later stages, because I have no idea if I can write a new chapter the next day. I'm really sorry. Then, let's talk about the ending. It was indeed a little rushed, but this is a very sad ending that I've planned for a long time, so I tried to write it as vaguely as possible. I wrote it very attentively, at least in my opinion. It can't be considered a bad ending. I don't know where to start with the plot of the book. If you have any doubts about the plot, you can contact me in private to discuss it. Later on, I'll update a chapter of epilogue, briefly explaining some of the plot. Finally, after 2 years and 9 months of companionship, this book has temporarily come to an end. I'll write the next book soon, and the specific news will be announced on QQ and Weibo. Everyone can add me when you have time. Search for author Luo Dai is me on Weibo. It's in the introduction of QQ's book page, so I won't repeat it here. Finally, I wish everyone can become a kind and happy person. Love you all. Chapter 997. There was a row of phoenix-tailed bamboos planted beside the wall of an old quadrangle that was stained with the smell of time. The afternoon sunlight scattered through the gaps of the bamboo leaves, adding some mottled spots to Zhang Canwen's white training clothes. He held a pot of spring tea in his hand and leaned against a reclining chair. Beside him was his little disciple who had just turned 18 this year. He had cultivated for more than 1,000 years, but he had only accepted 2 disciples. The first one had experienced hardship since childhood and finally broke free from the cage, but he eventually returned to the cage willingly and died in the 1,000-Year War. Now, this little disciple had been safe and happy since childhood. He was about to turn 18, but he was still an ignorant child. Today, he had called him here to instruct him to go to the demon region for training. The little disciple had a clingy personality. When he knew that he was going to go out to train alone, he was unhappy. Until now, he was still pouting, full of reluctance. Silly child, Master will die eventually. If you don't want to leave now, what will you do in the future? After living for more than 1,000 years, Zhang Canwen naturally had no qualms about talking about life and death. The little disciple had a look of disapproval on his face. I heard people say that Master has lived for more than 1,000 years, and Master is invincible in the world. He lives as long as heaven and earth. How can he die? As long as heaven and earth? Zhang Canwen sneered, but there was a layer of sadness in his eyes. Silly child, how can there be as long as heaven and earth? Moreover, heaven and earth will die too. The little disciple looked at his master strangely and argued, how can heaven and earth die? Of course heaven and earth will die. But who can kill heaven and earth? Others can't kill it, but he can. The little disciple looked a little worried, and there was already doubt in his eyes about whether his master had dementia. Why does heaven and earth want to kill itself? Zhang Canwen put down the teapot in his hand and looked into the distance. When others want you to die and want you to kill yourself, what choice do you have? The little disciple wanted to say something, but Zhang Canwen waved his hand and stopped him. Silly child, Master is the same. One day, when everyone wants Master to die, even you want Master to die, Master can only die. Hearing Zhang Canwen's words, the little disciple's face was a little more frightened and angry. He said loudly, Master, are you confused? Hee. Zhang Canwen laughed and didn't say anything else. The little disciple didn't want to pay any more attention to her master. She pouted and left angrily. The afternoon breeze blew through the bamboo leaves, shattering the scattered sun. Zhang Canwen, who had been silent for a long time, picked up the teapot again and raised it towards the sky. He hummed an old tune that sounded both sad and happy at the same time. The years are long, the clothes are thin. Drink a pot of spring tea, no more worries. Drink a pot of spring tea, don't worry anymore. Brother Zhou, don't worry about me anymore. That's all for the epilogue. Here's the first chapter of the new book. The ending of this book was a little heavy, but the style of this new book is much lighter. The genre is also not quite the same. I hope everyone will like it. There were links to new books at the bottom of the chapter. Zhou Hao was a second-generation tycoon. His father was the richest man in China. As a qualified rich second generation, fresh clothes and a horse were the basic configuration. Even if he died, he would die in the deep roar of a Bugatti. Yes, at the age of 28, Zhou Hao's car overturned in the first race of spring. When he opened his eyes again, he looked at the snow-white hospital walls around him. Zhou Hao couldn't help but admire the Bugatti in his heart. He didn't expect the Bugatti to be so durable. It crashed into the pier at a speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour, but it didn't break into pieces. Instead, it could be sent to the hospital in one piece. It was indeed a top supercar worth more than 30 million yuan. But soon, a wave of memories poured into his mind, making him understand that the Bugatti really wasn't that durable. This was no longer the world Zhou Hao lived in. It was 500 years later, 2519 AD. In this world, his name was still Zhou Hao, but he was no longer the son of the richest man. Instead, he was a third-year high school student from a poor family. At this time, he was sleeping in the hospital not because he was sick, but because he was accompanying his sick mother. The technology and culture of the Earth 500 years later had not changed much. The only difference was that during these 500 years, there were many martial artists on Earth, so the entire human world had entered the era of martial artists. Of course, these martial artists were not the so-called masters who swindled people in Zhou Hao's previous life, but superhumans whose strength was beyond the imagination of his previous life. In this era, martial artists had a very high social status. The local leaders of all levels of government were all held by martial artists. Even the idle martial artists in society enjoyed extremely high social benefit. In the common saying of the common people, once you become a martial artist, you can have money, beauties, and cars. As long as you could become a martial artist, you could have everything effortlessly. Zhou Hao, who was a top rich second generation in his previous life, naturally had no interest in money, beauties, and cars. However, the omnipotent martial artists in his memory made him very excited. Not to mention anything else, no matter how fast the Bugatti ran, it was not as cool and refreshing as Sun Wukong, who could run 108,000 miles with a somersault. Of course, all this had nothing to do with Zhou Hao for the time being. He was just an ordinary high school student. His mother suffered from severe uremia, and the millions of surgery fees had yet to be settled. He woke up from a top-rich second generation to a high school student bearing the pressure of millions of surgery fees. It was a little exciting to think about it. Zhou Hao really felt excited. As a rich second generation in his previous life, he was basically a moth. It was not that he had no dreams or talent, but because of his father's existence, everything was too easy. Moreover, he knew very well that no matter what he did, he was destined to be unable to surpass his father. In the end, he was still destined to live like a moth. On the contrary, his life experience in this life made him feel that he could live more realistically. Therefore, he did not need any psychological preparation at all. He quickly adapted to his current identity. With the bright incandescent light in the ward, Zhou Hao began to think. Judging from the current situation, the first thing to do was to make money. The million surgery fees must be settled as soon as possible. Zhou Hao did not have a mother in his previous life. In this life, he finally had a cheap mother. No matter what, he could not be separated from her so soon. According to his memory, his mother, Chen Suazian, was a mother that completely matched Zhou Hao's imagination. Although she did not earn much and lived in a rented house, she supported Zhou Hao to study in the best private high school in the city. She worked hard to support the family, which was why she suffered from uremia at a young age. After the surgery fees were settled, the next step was to make money. In this world, The only way to become a martial artist was to buy the vitality pills sold by the government. These vitality pills cost 20,000 each, and each person was limited to 3. Ordinary people only had 100 calories of vitality. After swallowing 3 vitality pills, their vitality could increase to 120 calories, and they would become a prospective martial artist, qualified to apply for martial arts school. If they could become a martial arts school student, there was a high chance that they would become a real martial artist. Of course, this was under the premise that everything went smoothly. In reality, the barrier of prospective martial artist alone was enough to stop more than half of the people. Martial arts school enrollment was based entirely on talent. Only the lucky ones with extraordinary talent could make it to the end. He could not tell how talented he was, but no matter what, he had to give it a try. The surgery fees were 1 million plus 3 vitality pills for 60,000. 1,060,000 was his current goal. Zhou Hao had no idea where he should go to make money, but this did not affect his excitement. As a rich second generation in his previous life, when did the word goal ever enter his mind? He had just arrived in this world, and already had such a difficult goal. This feeling could only be described in one word: exciting. However, this feeling of excitement did not last long. Soon, there was movement on the bed next to him. His mother, Chen Suazhen, said in a weak voice, "How, are you awake? I have something to tell you." "Yes, I'm awake." The memories in his mind allowed Zhou Hao to quickly adapt to his mother-son identity. He got up from the bed and nodded in response. Chen Suazhen's expression was a little conflicted. In reality, she did not sleep the whole night. Only now did she make up her mind. She continued to say to Zhou Hao, "When you were young, I told you that your father passed away a long time ago. But in reality, I lied to you. Your father is still alive, and he's a martial artist." Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment. A bad feeling welled up in his heart. Martial artist? What rank is he? According to his memory, martial artists were divided into 9 ranks. Rank 3 and above were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. It was rare for ordinary people to see them. Those below rank 3 were not ordinary people either. For example, in Linjiang City, where Zhou Hao came from, the commander of the city was a rank 3 martial artist. He was rank 6 back then, but I saw him on TV a few days ago. He's now the principal of Capital City Martial Arts School. His cultivation is rank 8. Zhou Hao was about to cry. What sin had he committed? In his past life, his father was the richest man in Sino Nation. In this life, he was a rank 8 martial artist. What was the concept of a rank 8 martial artist? A rank 7 martial artist could be called a grandmaster. A rank 8 martial artist was a grandmaster. On the grandmaster ranking in Sino Nation, there were only 30 or so grandmasters. This was already the country with the most grandmasters in the world. In other small countries, grandmasters were rare. Many countries did not even have grandmasters. It was no exaggeration to say that if a rank 8 grandmaster wanted to, he could destroy a country by himself. Goals? Struggle? Everything was gone. It did not matter whether he became a martial artist or not. With a grandmaster as his father, the only thing he needed to do was to eat and wait for death, just like in his past life. When you were just born, he said that your martial arts talent was not good. Others also said that he gave birth to a useless person. I couldn't take it anymore, so I left with you. Now that I think about it, I was too extreme back then, causing you to suffer for so many years. Chen Suazhen did not notice Zhou Hao's expression and continued to ramble. I'll contact him later. He should be coming to pick you up soon. He has a high status, so he must be busy. You have to take care of yourself in the future, huh? Still not contacting him? Zhou Hao slapped the bed and stood up. I don't think I can acknowledge this, father. Chen Suazhen did not expect this reaction from him. She was stunned for a moment. I can't take care of you in the future. You're still young. I still can't acknowledge him. How did you inherit my temper? Chen Suazhen did not know whether to laugh or cry. Even if you don't think about yourself, you have to think about my surgery fees. Zhou Hao was still unmoved. You sounded like you were going to die. It doesn't sound like you're going to undergo surgery. In his memory, his mother had a stubborn temper. She could take him away in the past. Now, she would definitely not accept that cheap father's help. Chen Suazhen was speechless and fell silent after being seen through. Zhou Hao struck while the iron was hot. He continued to persuade her. Actually, we don't have to look for him. I'll think of a way to pay for the surgery fees. After you recover, I'll take the martial arts school entrance exam. When I become a martial artist in the future and have a higher cultivation than him, you can take me back. At that time, you can point at his nose and ask him if the son of Chen Suazhen is a useless person. Think about it. That's the only way to vent your anger. Vent her anger, but he was a rank 8 martial artist. Was that even possible? Chen Suazhen naturally knew that it was impossible. However, looking at her son's serious and stubborn face, she felt very comforted. After a while, Chen Suazhen sighed. You really don't want to acknowledge him. Chapter 998. Everything in the world was born with intelligence. Once intelligence was formed, it was difficult to calm down. The ancient immortal emperors and demon gods were extremely powerful, but they were bound by the heavenly Tao. Feeling injustice, they thought of slaughtering the heavens. However, the heavenly Tao was primordial. How could the stars block the night sky? When they were defeated, they had 2 sons. One was called Fuxi, and the other was called the Heavenly Emperor. Fuxi derived the 8 trigrams, and the Heavenly Emperor wrote the Lianshan and Guizhong. The power of the 8 trigrams separated the human world and the mountain and sea realms. It cut off the 3 essences and used the power of the immortal emperors and demons to temporarily restrain the heavenly Tao. It also borrowed the power of the ancient 2 changes to break the cycle of reincarnation and invite the heavenly Tao into the jar. During this period, Shenong covered the mountain and sea realm, and Digu fought for the essences. Then, King Wen performed the Book of Changes and sent the heavenly Tao into reincarnation. After that, there were all kinds of demon gods and evil tricks. It caused the naive heavenly Tao's divinity to gradually wither, and humanity to slowly grow. In the end, the humanized heavenly Tao embarked on the path of self-destruction. Everything was just a plot to resist. I know it's hard to understand, but in a sense, that's how life is. Let's look at it from a psychological perspective. Freud divided the mental structure into 3 levels: the ID, the ego, and the superego. What are these 3 levels in the primordial universe of this book? The heavenly Tao is the ID, and what all living beings seek is the superego. What is the ego? This book is about the stages of the ego. In the end, the ego kills the ID and becomes the superego. At this stage, the superego might become the ID again, and a new heavenly Tao might be born again. The paper was full of absurd words and bitter tears. Forget it, I'll just read the new book. Actually, I can only publish it after I have 2,500 words. If I don't want to read it, I don't have to. Also, there's no need to doubt that this is really my new book. Maybe the style has changed a lot, but I'm still quite happy writing it. Chapter 1. I can't recognize this father. Zhou Hao was a top rich 2nd generation. His father was the richest man in China. As a qualified rich 2nd generation, fresh clothes and a horse were the basic configuration. Even if he died, he would die in the deep roar of a Bugatti. Yes, at the age of 28, Zhou Hao overturned his car in the first race of spring. When he opened his eyes again, looking at the snow-white hospital walls around him, Zhou Hao couldn't help but admire in his heart. He didn't expect the Bugatti to be so durable. It crashed into the bridge pier at a speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour, but it didn't break into pieces. Instead, it could be sent to the hospital in one piece. It really deserved to be a top supercar worth more than 30 million yuan. But very quickly, a wave of memories surged into his mind, making him understand that the Bugatti really wasn't that durable. This was no longer the world that Zhou Hao was in when he was alive. Instead, it was 500 years later, in the year 2519. In this world, his name was still Zhou Hao, but he was no longer the son of the richest man. Instead, he was a third-year high school student from a poor family. He was sleeping in the hospital not because he was sick, but because he was accompanying his sick mother. After 500 years, the technology and culture on Earth had not changed much. The only difference was that many martial artists had appeared on Earth during these 500 years. As a result, the entire human world had entered the era of martial artists. Of course, these martial artists were not the so-called masters who swindled people in Zhou Hao's previous life, but superhumans whose strength was beyond the imagination of his previous life. In this era, martial artists had a very high social status. The local leaders of all levels of government were all held by martial artists. Even the idle martial artists in society enjoyed extremely high social benefit. In the common saying of the common people, once you become a martial artist, you can have money, beauties, and cars. As long as you could become a martial artist, you could have everything effortlessly. Zhou Hao, who was a top rich second generation in his previous life, naturally had no interest in money, beauties, and cars. However, the omnipotent martial artists in his memory made him very excited. Not to mention anything else, no matter how fast the Bugatti ran, it was not as cool and refreshing as Sun Wukong, who could run 108,000 miles with a somersault. Of course, all this had nothing to do with Zhou Hao for the time being. He was just an ordinary high school student. His mother suffered from severe uremia, and the millions of surgery fees had not been settled yet. When he woke up, he went from a top-rich second generation to a high school student who had to bear the pressure of millions of surgery fees. It was a little exciting to think about it. Zhou Hao really felt excited. As a rich second generation in his previous life, he was basically a moth. It was not that he had no ambition or talent, but because of his father's existence, everything was too easy. Moreover, he knew very well that no matter what he did, he was destined to be unable to surpass his father. In the end, he was still destined to live like a moth. On the contrary, his life experience in this life made him feel that he could live more realistically. Therefore, he did not need any psychological preparation at all. He quickly adapted to his current identity. With the bright incandescent light in the ward, Zhou Hao began to think. Judging from the current situation, the first thing to do was to make money. The million surgery fees must be settled as soon as possible. Zhou Hao did not have a mother in his previous life. In this life, he finally had a cheap mother. No matter what, he could not be separated from her so soon. According to his memory, his mother, Chen Suazian, was a mother who completely matched Zhou Hao's imagination. Although she did not earn much and lived in a rented house, she supported Zhou Hao to study in the best private high school in the city. She worked hard to support the family, which was why she got uremia at a young age. After the surgery fees were settled, the next step was to make money. In this world, the only way to become a martial artist was to buy the vitality pills sold by the government. These vitality pills cost 20,000 each, and each person was limited to 3. Ordinary people only had 100 calories of vitality. After swallowing 3 vitality pills, their vitality could increase to 120 calories, and they would become a prospective martial artist, qualified to apply for martial arts school. If they could become a martial arts school student, there was a high chance that they would become a real martial artist. Of course, this was under the premise that everything went smoothly. In reality, The barrier of prospective martial artist alone was enough to stop more than half of the people. Martial arts school enrollment was based entirely on talent. Only the lucky ones with extraordinary talent could make it to the end. He could not tell how talented he was, but no matter what, he had to give it a try. The surgery fees were 1 million, plus the 3 vitality pills for 60,000. 1,060,000 was his current goal. Zhou Hao had no idea where he should go to make money, but this did not affect his excitement. As a rich second generation in his previous life, when did the word goal ever enter his mind? He had just arrived in this world, and already had such a difficult goal. This feeling could only be described in one word: exciting. However, this exciting feeling did not last long. Soon, there was movement on the bed next to him. His mother, Chen Suizhen, said in a weak voice, "How, are you awake? Mom has something to tell you." "Yes, I'm awake." The memories in his mind allowed Zhou Hao to quickly adapt to his mother-son identity. He got up from the bed and nodded in response. Chen Suizhen's expression was a little conflicted. In reality, she did not sleep the whole night. Only now did she make up her mind. She continued to say to Zhou Hao, "When you were young, I told you that your father passed away a long time ago. But in reality, I lied to you. Your father is still alive, and he's a martial artist." Zhou Hao was stunned for a moment. A bad feeling welled up in his heart. Martial artist? What rank is he? According to his memory, martial artists were divided into 9 ranks. Rank 3 and above were rare existences. It was rare for ordinary people to see them. Those below rank 3 were not ordinary people either. For example, in Linjiang City, where Zhou Hao came from, the commander of the city was a rank 3 martial artist. He was rank 6 back then, but I saw him on TV a few days ago. He's now the principal of Capital City Martial Arts School. His cultivation is rank 8. Zhou Hao was about to cry. What sin had he committed? His father was the richest man in Sino Nation in his past life. In this life, he was a rank 8 martial artist. What was the concept of a rank 8 martial artist? A rank 7 martial artist could be called a grandmaster. A rank 8 martial artist was a grandmaster. On the grandmaster ranking in Sino Nation, there were only 30 grandmasters. This was already the country with the most grandmasters in the world. In other small countries, grandmasters were rare. Many countries did not even have grandmasters. It was not an exaggeration to say that if a rank 8 grandmaster wanted to, he could destroy a country by himself. Goals? Struggle? Everything was gone. It did not matter whether he became a martial artist or not. With a grandmaster as his father, the only thing he needed to do was to eat and wait for death, just like in his past life. When you were just born, he said that your martial arts talent was not good. Others also said that he gave birth to a useless person. I couldn't take it anymore, so I left with you. Now that I think about it, I was too extreme back then, causing you to suffer for so many years. Chen Suizhen did not notice Zhou Hao's expression and continued to ramble. I'll contact him later. He should be coming to pick you up soon. He has a high status, so he must be busy. You have to take care of yourself in the future, huh? Still not contacting him? Zhou Hao slapped the bed and stood up. I don't think I can acknowledge this, father. Chen Suizhen did not expect this reaction from him. She was stunned for a moment. I can't take care of you in the future. You're still young. I still can't acknowledge him. How did you inherit my temper? Chen Suizhen did not know whether to laugh or cry. Even if you don't think about yourself, you have to think about my surgery fees. Zhou Hao was still unmoved. You sounded like you were going to die. It doesn't sound like you're going to undergo surgery. In his memory, his mother had a stubborn temper. She could take him away in the past. Now, she would definitely not accept that cheap father's help. Chen Suizhen was speechless and fell silent after being seen through. Zhou Hao struck while the iron was hot. He continued to persuade her. Actually, we don't have to look for him. I'll think of a way to pay for the surgery fees. After you recover, I'll take the martial arts school entrance exam. When I become a martial artist in the future and have a higher cultivation than him, you can take me back. At that time, you can point at his nose and ask him if the son of Chen Suazhen is a useless person. Think about it. That's the only way to vent your anger. Vent her anger, but he was a rank 8 martial artist. Was that even possible? Chen Suazhen naturally knew that it was impossible. However, looking at her son's serious and stubborn face, she did not know why, but her heart was comforted. After a while, Chen Suazhen sighed. You really don't want to acknowledge him? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.